Welcome, everybody, to our Sunday Trialogue. You know me, I'm the Headless Giant. We've got Ethan Indigo and Ricardo Cavallero joining me again for another three-way discussion about pressing topics of the moment. So let's start with you, Ricardo. You said you had a video you wanted to share with us?
Sure. First of all, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the show. So before I present the video, I just want to make a small observation. Let's imagine that the whole universe and therefore the Earth as a fractal or as a part of it, or whatever you want to describe it, is all comprised of electromagnetic forces that are vibrating at different frequencies, and therefore we create this matrix we call reality. So if we are a part of that electromagnetic major body, and we are a specific signature represented in this biosuit that we are wearing as our interface into this world, it means that it can be somewhat altered by differences in this electromagnetic field. Are you following my line of thought? So if you are placed in one normal site with the normal electromagnetic field, I will see you as you are normally. But if I put you where those forces are compressed, I'm going to make you shorter without any effect. Okay, so although people that are you too are going to watch this may seem, this is just a matter of perspective. This is the angle of the ground, this causing this optical illusion. Okay, many scientists have gone to the 3 or 4 sites that exist that are doing this now as a tourist attraction. And they use levels for the ground, they use laser metrics, they tried everything. So these sites are still opening because they cannot understand how this happened, but they cannot say it doesn't happen. Okay, so I'm going to share you the video, and I hope you can understand what I'm talking about. And this is, I'm going to choose, I have the Colorado one. I'm going to the Oregon Vortex because I think it shows better what it is. Not sure if you can see it on screen. Can you?
There we go. Yeah, adding it to screen now.
Okay, so I'm going to put it on play.
Wait, hang on.
So I'm not sure you cannot hear it, right?
I can hear it.
Oh, good. So I'll shut up. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to try to explain what you just seen, because it lacks context, right? So the context is very simple. This is exact boundary of a very powerful ley line that they found in these 3 or 4 places. And what happens is you are moving from non-interference of this ley line into the interference of this ley line. That's the middle of those 2 pillars is exactly the middle that separates the lines. So there are videos about this where you can actually see the people expanding or contracting as they are moving towards one another and trade positions. So to me, this is more clear evidence that it is all an holographic universe, because here we see our electromagnetic field that is our composed of our this bodysuit being affected directly by difference in the electromagnetism of the Earth. So you can see actually that the light, somehow they explain this, that the light is compressed and creates this illusion that we are seeing. But as compressing the light, you are actually compressing the whole molecular structure of the body in that electromagnetic field. So I'm looking forward to your observations on what you just seen.
I think compression of light is so vital to understand because people don't think that light can be compressed, but it can. and we are compressed light. You know, I mean, when it comes down to it, photons, electrons are pretty interchangeable. So if you compress these forces, you're talking about changing the structure of the thing geometrically. And this is why you don't weigh as much as a black hole, because we've got all this empty space inside of us. And if we were really solid objects at our size, being 100% solid, we would cause the entire planet to collapse in on ourselves. So that is evidence of a holographic universe. If you think about photons being electrons, which that's why we have solar panels, because photons get transmitted over to electrons and then we get the electrical signal. We're talking about a holographic type universe. Now, we haven't really come to understand the full extent of it, but I think people are starting to understand that there's a lot that's being kept from us. We are not these solid bodies. We have this energy envelope, you know, and that's one of the things I like to explore with aura viewing and several other different techniques. But it's using that idea of this photonic universe, this photonic electric universe.
Before you speak, I just want to add this thing. I got to this by researching to a person that I recorded an episode and released yesterday. That is Dan Shaw, and the guy that, or the group or the team that he worked with, that they created this big, a medallion this big, incorporating magnets. And although the effect is a little bit smaller, if you put that magnet in the middle of two persons, it creates that vortex anywhere in the world. So it doesn't matter where. There is natural, but they find a way to make it anywhere. So it's a small, like a coin, like a big coin that is plastic and has magnets in it. Well, how it works, I don't know. But the BBC took him to do an episode, and they
7
placed the
different
medallions.
metals.
Yeah.
It's 7 different metals incorporated into the same thing at a geometric ratio to one another. And you see this happening in all sorts of sacred sites around the world. They incorporate these different metals. You've got the wrist elements from Sumerian cultures that are made of those 7 different metals made in that sort of shape. Yeah, it's a magnetic device that is activated with salt water. That's why it's put on the body, is because it's collecting the sweat then creating the charge.
What's your thoughts, Satan, on this?
Well, many smarter people than I have concluded that everything is light, right? Whether it's light condensed or any number of ways to look at it. So, I as I try to maintain an open mind, I know that I can't really even say what's going on. It's so fascinating. I really don't. I feel like I can't say. But it's the potential is there for any number of things to be occurring, right? And I think ruling out one thing or another would be. It's almost like what we think about this is revealing about really how we think, right? If we're one-sided about it. So I almost I'm baffled by it, and I feel like I can't say. But I don't know, and I don't mean that I don't mean to suggest that I know one way or another. My point is I don't know what's going on, but I believe the interaction with mind and light is certainly there. And with light, with other forces, gravity, of course. So.
Yeah, but how do we explain the camera? It's not only us that see it; the camera sees it too. So it has to be happening on that person and not in our eyes. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. And I don't mean to say that it's just a camera trick. I mean to say that it might be physical changes going on with the light beings that we are, right? As Headless pointed out, we're really, when it comes down to it, mostly space. So But again, I don't mean to point to that being camera tricks whatsoever.
Oh no, I
I
would.
just, yeah.
That's always the first thing you got to go to, though. Always got to look for the camera tricks, and if you don't see them, then you got to start investigating the physical site. There's so much done with AI nowadays that it's almost ridiculous to try and accept anything at face
Oh yeah.
value. So
I
think
forget who
it's
said this, but it is important to be skeptical, but even more important to be skeptical of skepticism.
Look, if I just saw this and I knew nothing else, I would be suspicious, obviously, right? So I decided to let's see what other people have to say about this. And what I found in terms of scientists is that they are very interested to go there, certify that it's not a hoax, but no interest in actually look. Let's I need this for a week or two because I need to bring a team here and put a lot of sensors and apparatus, and we need to understand this is something completely out of what we think it's possible. But no, they just went there, they saw, okay, it's real, cool, see you. So nothing more. And I've been seeing this in archaeoacoustics. I've seen this in archaeoastronomy. It's just we find these amazing things, and after we record them, we put them on a drawer. Just another interesting thing. And
Yeah,
I can't understand it. I can't understand it.
Isn't that kind of anti-scientific, right? Of at least the trends of the last few hundred years, and to that idea, how much have we been anti-scientific in all these pursuits and others, maybe because of the influence of the higher ups pertaining to technology that they're hiding, right? Oh, there's an anomaly that's provable. Forget about
And
it.
you can create it at will with this small medallion. Let's make a big medallion.
Right. So the idea that science isn't doing its job really goes down to the scientific method, because the last thing any scientist wants to do is come up with a proposed theory that gets them laughed at. So what they'll do is they'll try and debunk it, and then they'll say, well, if I come up with a theory, then somebody's going to come along and smash that theory because I don't know what's going on here. I don't have the full picture of everything that's happening. So I'm going to put it into that shelf and let somebody else make a fool out of themselves, because they're more concerned with their paycheck than they are with actual discoveries, because actual discoveries is messy. Collecting a paycheck is very, very comfortable. And so I think that's a big part of the problem here, is that they don't feel the level of freedom that they would if they were just,
Look, if you are you just accomplish the complete education process, right? And you started working, you followed others, and you start getting a name yourself because of the work. You put your name in this paper and that paper and so on, and later you get aspirations. I should be doing my own paper perhaps and try to put other people's names in my paper. But if you do that, you have to put something that the other people will be willing to put their name on the paper, right? So that constrains things until you get to a point where either you don't have a family and you are ready for anything and suffer the consequences, or you are retiring. Because see all of this burst of courage from scientists when they finally are retiring and they have been all their lives against this dogmatic system. That's when they come up with everything. Climate change, global warming is a phony program. They only do it when they are retiring, because they know if they do it sooner, it's the end of their career. No more books, no more papers, no more school. They are kicked out of the schools. So it's a process that governs itself without any word needed being said, which I find quite interesting. It's terrible but great once more.
Yeah, I agree. It's I think that's why your institution is so valuable, is because it gives people the opportunity to propose things in such a way that it probably won't jeopardize their job. So you might have a big draw with a lot of these scientific types who want to make an impact, but they don't want to hurt their careers in the process. And so getting in touch with the Institute for Natural Philosophy, if you're a scientist and you want to get in touch with the Institute for Natural Philosophy and see what you can do, see what you can work out, so that your name doesn't necessarily have to be immediately attached to a theory that might get you some blowback, that would be preferable, because you're there as the release valve for all the stuffy, stuck-up scientific types to sort of let loose. That's valuable. That's important.
Sure, thank you. That's the case for Stephen Moore, for instance, who is a mathematician, and they didn't accept his paper, so he published it on the magazine. Not that people have noticed that that's something that was rejected by the community, the scientific community, or by the peers of this community, but he that's the only place where he could put his paper. He published it on his name, obviously, but it's not peer reviewed, it's not recognized by academia, nothing. So if he wants to put it out, he needs a medium to express his opinions outside of that group that already exclude them. Because it's fascinating when, imagine that you create a painting, as you were showing me before, right? And you present the painting per peer review, and they return the paper and they return the painting and say, sorry, we cannot peer review this because this painting has not been invented yet. You see, this style of painting has not been invented yet, so we cannot peer review it. So that's what happens. They just put things back. I remember his first try, he was including archaeoastronomic elements, ancient megaliths, ancient sites, and he was rejected. He made something like this, a paper very well documented, because he thought, I'm going to go up against these guys. I'm going to bring everything I have. And so the first thing that they turned back to him was, if you want us to even look at your paper, you need to take all those sites and all those alignments out of there, because there was no astronomy in the ancient world. So therefore, it cannot be evaluated. And so he reduced the paper just to the mathematics, and that's when they told him, we cannot judge your mathematics because they haven't been invented yet. So, well, I think it's fascinating. You don't need a plausible explanation. You just say whatever they want, and it's no good. The wall is, the white is too white, or I don't know, it's something ridiculous completely.
Yeah, I completely feel that. I think we're moving into a new era. They say that the pace of science moves at the death of tenured professors. And we're at that point now where a lot of tenured professors are kicking off. So we're going to see some changes on the establishment going forward, because this whole p-hacking crisis that's been going on in science, if you guys don't know, look up the crisis of science. Look up the number of crisis of science papers that have been kicked back after being published. They didn't catch them. They weren't interested. They just wanted to publish or perish. That's the idea inside the institution, is publish or perish. And all these people were, on the right side with their teams and their staff. And then it turns out that they were just producing garbage, just pure garbage. All their statistical analysis was based off of, who was paying for the study. And so the crisis of science continues. And so all these papers are non-replicable. They don't have any sort of basis in any replication. They call it the replication crisis as well. So if you look up those terms, you'll find that most of the scientific community right now is reeling from the fact that all of the papers that are coming through are just pure garbage. And now it's all being written by AI too. So stack that on top of it.
One of the flaws that people that remark on scientists, if they're not scientists themselves, of Western science has been the summation in the statement that the West has eliminated looking at the immaterial for so long, whereas the East is kind of like, if there was an anomaly, they went and looked at it, and so there was no restrictions on anomalies that were curative, maybe, or revealing of science. And I wanted to say that when we bring these trialogues together, it'll be really interesting how they bounce off and reveal themes that, because we didn't discuss these prior, and how they maybe develop a whole new idea unto themselves in that. And I wanted to bring up the idea of bringing together the East and the West philosophically, scientifically, and politically. Because if we're going to clash, that'll be bad for everyone. But if we do bring together the Eastern and Western ideas of all sorts, I think we do find what is best in idea and practice. And so I just wanted to point out the importance and the power of bringing together East and West. And I wanted to share two ideas that are can be practically suited and suited for one's meditation journey as well. So really interesting ideas that can really empower one's being and mindset. And from the East, it's for us Western minds. The Mohists, M-O-H, or simply M-O, were a philosophical group started and led by a guy named Mo, which kind of we think of as the West. I don't know about in Portugal, but if I think of a guy named Mo, I think of the guy like down the block hanging out at the bar or something. Hey, Mo. But
Mo here is what grains the it's the mill. It's the wheel
right.
of the mill is the
okay,
Mo.
Cool. That makes sense. And yeah, that's an agricultural term too. My attempt at humor is so dry. Forgive me, everyone.
That's why it's great.
So the
Ethan?
I think you faded out. Ethan, come back to us.
There I'm back. Okay. The Mohists at their creation were kind of in at this time period of the battle of philosophical schools, where royal groups or feudal groups, if you will, also had some philosophical school behind them. So Mo has a lot of interesting things and was kind of contrarian to the Confucians, the Confucius people. But a really important thing, I think, that could really empower us all in our observations pertaining to the real world and any number of situations, political and otherwise, is the idea of non-partisanship. And non-judgmental love, total love, and just being non-judgmental was his a big pursuit of the Mohists and Mohism, which could be summed up as non-partisanship, and a love for all beings, your sister and someone else, and the want or desire or attitude towards the best of the most. The best for the most. So, but I think just in a meditation sense, the pursuit of being non-judgmental, it almost sounds so cliche. So forgive me once again, but it is so powerful. The pursuit of non-partisanship, just to see the real through any prior judgment factors we might have adopted, or rather might have been put on us, so just that pursuit is really empowering in action and in mind state. The second one is noted as being kind of contrary to the Confucians, but I don't think it is necessarily. But those who were about Confucius were very much oriented in ritualistic action and homage prior to actual engagement in the world, if you will, is one way that the Mohists saw a flaw in their ritualism. And so I would say a second thing from the Mohists that is great a lot of Americans kind of do this automatically, like whatever. But we don't need to write ritual off entirely, right? Just these things that are not pertaining to actual meditation processes for the esoteric kind of aspect of it, or actual ethic engagement for the exoteric part of it, right? So I hope that makes sense. The Mohists are interesting philosophy, complementary and contrary to Confucian and Eastern thinking. But just to underline the idea of bringing East and West together during, fraught political circumstances and social circumstances, even within, I think it can be really empowering in that sense. So,
Can I ask what the Moist cosmology is? Did they share a similar cosmology to the Taoists?
yes, I believe so. I believe he was into the egg cosmology, but I'm not 100% sure. Be interesting to find that out. I don't know that they had a diverse cosmology rather than a diverse way of looking at the world in the as it was type of thing.
Right. I see that time period where you've got the rise of Taoism and all of these philosophical traditions. That was like a belt all the way around the world. That similar time period was when the Greeks were coming up with their philosophies. And so you've got sort of like this very narrow window of about 400 years where all of the planet's philosophies came together and were put out that we're using still to this day.
And to a real base kind of political or human understanding without political restraints. The Silk Road at that time was, not necessarily the Silk Road, but many different routes of trade, of resource, and certainly thought. There's interesting stories. I forget what it's called in Greek. Headless, you might know. Anyway, the point is the character puts forth the idea that if he takes a step or process of going towards the park and only goes there half the distance per step,
Zeno's paradox.
The paradox of Zeno, paradox
Zeno's
of Zeno
paradox
is exactly this. This is a wonderful thought exercise. And also it is exactly in parallel with, again, I forget the name of the allegory, if you will, or the lesson concept, but they use a stick. If you split a stick in half every time, you'll never have an incomplete stick. You'll always have a very short stick in theory. So the same kind of
that goes into the topology problems that they have with mapping things, right? So if you're going to measure the circumference of a lake, for instance, and you have to do it with as straight a pieces as possible to get the right measurement, you're going to keep having to break the sticks almost to infinity so that you can get the line around this body of water and understand how big it is. So it has to do with that same halving problem. So you have to continue halving all the way down if you're going to measure an area, or if you're going to, accurately reach a target. So these two mathematical problems really do highlight how illusory our system is, because what Zeno proposed as the solution to the paradox is that motion is impossible. And you're like, well, how can motion possibly be impossible? He was taking the universe in the most obvious sense of the word. It's all one thing. There is no distance between things because we're all one thing. Space and time, these are illusions, right?
Well, and I love that you brought up those practical mathematical proposals in that what we often consider a very philosophical idea, right? Ideas. So that's great correspondence, Ellis.
Yeah, this comes from the philosopher Parmenides, who was the teacher of Zeno. And Parmenides wrote this poem called On Nature. And in that poem, he talks about the nature of the gods. He talks about the nature of humans. He says there are two different worlds that we live in, right? We live in the realm of man, which is the realm of opinion. And we also live in the world of God, which is fact or truth. And so most of what we get in terms of words are based in opinion. Like people are just expressing the opinion of the world of God. And you have to remember that, because if you're not looking towards that world of God, you're never going to know the truth of any of this stuff.
Yeah,
I thought that was really pretty.
It is. It is. Regarding the last part, I would say that it reminds me, when you described it, that we are all one, so there is no distance. It reminds me that vision that, although it seems quite big for us, as we go and explore how further the universe goes, we can all be inside an atom of something else. So if everything is conscious, then there is no limits to scalability. So we have no idea of what is. So,
let me give you a cognitive example real quick. So let's say you zoom out to the farthest level of the known universe, and then you keep going, and then you keep going. Eventually, you're going to turn around and look at the universe and see a tiny little speck, right? That's the known universe. Is there any distance inside of there? Does distance even matter at this point?
It's a star at a distance.
Right. Maybe it's all one thing, and our perspective is wrong because it's a alternate type of dimension.
I agree.
And that explains the background radiation.
There is an experiment that they've conducted experiments pertaining to cosmic rays that are similar to the dual slit experiment, where they found their consciousness affected the light pattern that already had been, but they were affecting it as if by its origination, but there was no way they could have. And forgive my lack of knowing what it's called and the
dark matter
reality of
affects,
it.
Well, what they say is that dark matter has all this gravity, right? But what if dark matter is actually conscious energy, or this informational energy, as if it has a weight all of its own? It's like, how come our thoughts don't have mass? Does anybody ask that question?
You're talking
Maybe it
about
does have mass. And that represents the dark matter of the universe, is this conscious energy. Which
you're talking
implies,
about what they call dark matter, right?
Right. So they don't know what it is. They can't identify it, but they identify this shift in light over top of these galaxies. And they assume, because of the amount of gravity that shows, that there's a layer of stuff that they can't see, which they call dark matter. But there's no evidence for it. I'm saying, what if that thing has no visibility because it is this conscious energy? It's this preformed energy that they know nothing about.
Plasma. It's a kind of a plasma. But you have to excuse them, because they are only looking for it for 40 years and only spend about 3 trillions or 4 trillions in looking for it. So it's normal that they haven't found it yet. But
and string theory. Don't forget about string theory. How many decades have they been working on that for nothing? They have nothing to show.
They have those 11 brains that no one can show in not even in physical terms beyond verbal description. But in terms of what you said, what Ethan presented, I would say that the problem with globalism is that it is seen as a materialistic thing, because what globalism should be is, in fact, a permeability between all cultures, where we can absorb the good from each one of them and not the bad, because we use the good for those to correct the bad in ours, and it will be a balanced system.
They didn't have any globalism.
Well, we both said the same thing.
Well, okay, well, I was going to say, this is what they did after they created control systems for the mind, right? So at a certain point, we lose the age of philosophy, and now we have the age of control systems. And so that's when you see all of this stuff start to break down, and then bring about a materialistic form of globalism instead of a mental globalism that we had prior to 2000 years ago.
Sure.
Sorry, I broke up. And to Ricardo, what you're saying, I think the localization empowerment is the only benefit of globalization, right? And so we need to look at how it's working for people, which is enabling sales channels of artisan products, for instance, or what have you, many different things, and check on the things that are not necessarily helpful to us all.
Sure, agree. Although if we look at it, the only things that it's globalized is the big corporations. It's not the small artifice.
I think the institutional leniency is a big problem, whether you're in the East or the West, right?
Yeah,
where they give deference to institutional operations, which kind of had led us to this astray scientism that we're seeing the results of, the lack of results of, if you will.
Education.
So, I think
it comes down to an education problem, I think.
Yeah.
Because you've got to have an education system that works so that people can interact without having to go between the government. And you can't really have propaganda if people can see right through it. They know the logical fallacies. They know all this stuff. And that's what you get with the trivium method. And the trivium method really got turned into a dial after the age of philosophy. Alexander the Great wrote to Plato. He said, you don't want to put this stuff in a book. We don't want to teach people how to think because then they'll see through our shit. Yes. So they decided to turn it down just like a knob. And so they can do this anytime they want to with education. They can turn it up or turn it down based upon people having access to the trivium method.
And still people didn't understand it. But
right, they pervert it.
Sure.
And proverbially, the East is more focused on the collective upbringing, the they all getting powerful, not necessarily a bad idea. And the West would be more focused on the I becoming, a bunch of I's becoming uplifted. And which one of those is optimal? I don't think either one is got one on the other. They're both, if we do it right, to Headless's point, then
go beyond the semantics. But if you go beyond,
I was going to say Taoism was like the indoctrination into the trivium method back then. And they taught the full Tao back then. And every state society after that point always picks and chooses what they want to take from the Tao and what they want to leave behind. So they're controlling the trivium right there. People should learn that stuff.
Learning from them.
Right.
No, sorry.
Go ahead, Ricardo.
I was saying that both of those systems still, while you can say that the Occidental system allows the I to become global, let's put it this way, while the East sees the global masses to produce a great country and not specifically a great empowered citizen. But you see that they are still how should I call it? Millionaires or billionaires in those Eastern societies as they are in this side of the pond. The thing is, they are much more on this side of the pond that in lower levels achieve some fair or some good lives in terms of financial capacity, which you don't see. My daughter is in China. Everything is as cheap as impossible imaginable. We cannot understand how is it possible that we are paying stuff in here at the price we are paying, knowing that it's done there, when they there are selling, for instance, with one thing that costs is $100 here, there will cost $180. It's unreal. It's just unreal. My daughter bought a battery, one of those auxiliary chargers, those batteries that you carry around when you don't have sites to connect your phone to a charger. So she bought a very powerful one that can charge up to 5 equipments to full charge and still have power. And here it was 87. She bought it for less than €3 with the delivery included.
It's a production society.
How is it possible?
Think about when America was the big producer of the world. Everything was cheap and they didn't have high inflation. because they were producing everything for the rest of the world.
Exactly.
So there really is something to that Trumpian policy, but I don't know exactly how that's ever going to happen. We don't have the banking policy that allowed for, a production-based society.
Yeah.
That's gone. So all he's really doing is raising taxes, which is that's
in
not going to
Ethan,
help us.
Sure. And Ethan, it was you, Ethan, right, that shared to me the guy from the tractors, the machines.
Yes.
Yes. So this guy was explaining to the American people why he's buying Chinese. Yeah, American farm. Why he's buying Chinese machinery? Because even if he has to pay the 20 or something % increase in tax, he still be I don't know if it was a 7 times less in price, and the machines are more than or even better than the ones that are produced in the United States. So you cannot say, oh, it's Chinese, is going to break down, or it has problems. It doesn't. It's machines that are made to work, and they work and they work and they work. So, but before you start
when the Chinese.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, finish. No, please.
No,
I was just going to say there was a time when the Chinese were noted for having less resilient steel than presented in fact, or similar type of idea. But now you're right; they broke that off. That's not a scheme that's happening anymore. And
there's still huge problems with the production.
There may be. I was just going to say that they are, a growing economy and helpful and so forth. And there is a problem in respect to the United States as far as local production. But the solution that the powers that be did, it's like, here's a problem. And the reaction, we all identify with that problem, but the solution is very much oriented, in fact, towards institutions. Leniency, and even more worse towards screwing over the more broke the individual, less money the individual has, whatever,
Ethan, let me ask you a question. So do you remember Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Barack Obama all saying that China is manipulating its currency? And they don't say anything more after that.
Of course. And stealing technology and so forth. Well, you know what I heard? I mean, this is...
You know what they're doing to manipulate the currency? They're keeping interest rates low.
Local production?
They're keeping interest rates low, and they're getting everybody into very fair loans, right? They don't want to charge people a shit ton of money. And that's why they're saying that they're manipulating their currencies, because they're actually doing things for the people. Now, if you go the opposite direction in America, where they're inflating everything, that's what we have. We're manipulating our currency. But guess what? They don't want to mention that. They only want to talk about China manipulating their own currency. But that's how they're doing it. They're making cheap loans for people so that they don't have to kill themselves.
They're changing the Western relationship with China is changing. Which one is right or wrong, I don't know, but trying to be nonpartisan. But I am certain that if we come together, we can definitely find better fortitude for humanity and better ideas when we're nonpartisan. And it's cliche, I know.
It would take honesty on the part of our politicians. That is almost impossible.
It would take authenticity, if not honesty, which we don't have. We don't have that anymore.
But the collaboration could just be, look, we are doing this and we are getting these results, and we are seeing that you are doing this and getting different results. So how is that you are doing? Because we need to implement this here, so that we never need you and you never need us, and we can exchange ideas or change goods that both don't produce or whatever. But what happens is just competition. So we have to be better than them, and then we aren't, but we keep saying that we are. But in terms of money, if I lived in a country that I have, instead of having control of my money, that control was given to a private entity to whom I have to pay by every single bill that is produced, I would be shut up completely. I wouldn't open my mouth to speak of any other economical system because that seems like a very bad business to the government. In fact, when you see that the amount of trillions, and I'm not very good in politics or any of this, but I see that there are trillions and trillions being given to this and then to that and to this program and to that program, and then the costs of the state, the supporting of the communities that there is for the city halls, for everything. Where is that money coming from? Because if we make the accounts, if they were real to exactly tell how much money they are producing digitally and not physically, the amount of money that they are producing would make the dollar worth, or any coin in the world, because in the EU you have the central bank of the EU, the money wouldn't worth nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's what they impose on African countries and third world countries is, okay, you are producing money. If you are producing money, then you have to lower the value of your money. And they don't do it. They just don't do it. But before you present your point, I just want to say one more thing in regard to Ethan. That is, to me, this I rather keep this in high hold. That is non-judgmental. Remember you saying that? It's non-judgmental. And I can understand that from a point of view that good and evil is a very selective thing. And it depends from culture to culture. It depends on perspective. It depends on need. It depends on so many values that something that is wrong over there might be right over here, and so on. So to judge one people is also to not judge one people is also to include a perception of free will versus determinism. This person is acting like this. Let me understand why she is acting like this, and just condemn the action, because what is motivating the person might have a justification, might have a reason behind it. That's how I see non-judgmental action.
That's a beautiful point. That's a beautiful point, and it is very in line with non-judgmental pursuits. I love it, and it's very also depictive of one more thought, Headless, you guys, and you'll like this, Ricardo, being a martial artist. In the West and in the current government and the past governments, there's so much pursuit for winning that we make others lose, in general and specifically. A very Eastern concept, or Kung Fu concept, if you will, and not that the East always practices it in government format, certainly, but seeking to not lose is a much better preface than seeking to win. It's slightly different, but if you approach things in that way, then you're not always trying to be better than them, right? As you remarked earlier, what about just being as good? Not losing is a much better pursuit and softer approach, and doesn't have this feeling like there's nothing on the table, we're gonna win. Like, just be easy. Not losing, it's a much better approach. Taking on a tariff war and winning is, that's a big process. Not losing to trade dynamics, much better approach. So thank you for sharing that idea of not losing as opposed to being, the winner is, I think, just a softer, easier Eastern integration that we could all use.
That's a really good point, because I think we're going to have to start thinking about these non-losing solutions real quick, because our coin is not being spent the same way around the world. I mean, America has fallen the fuck off. They're openly resisting, which was not something common 20 years ago.
And it's really, in essence, maybe because of the insistence on winning rather the insistence on not losing. Everybody not losing rather than one group winning. Well, you guess what? You form competition, if not enemies, right? In that approach.
What's the point of being an empire if you can't push people around with violence?
But do you remember Reagan speaking? If we had an enemy common to the earth, wouldn't we align all together trying to fight this common enemy? And isn't this enemy already amongst us? So
you know what is, I remember that, and what's underneath that is an agreement that Gorbachev and Reagan had, the missile deterrence or whatever it was. There's a clause in that is related to unidentified things over their installations, to not just go, to not like get nuked because it ain't either one of them. Essentially, what is the language kind of proposes?
He says off-world threat. He does say off-world threat.
It's an insane.
Because they're having this events up top of nuclear silos and all of that stuff. Each time they're going to do a test, it appears something in the sky and everything shuts down. You have several cases well documented in England. I don't know about America, but England has several well documented situations like that. Sorry, Atlas.
It's insane the amount of cooperation you see all of these world's governments acting in when it comes to two things: UFOs and Antarctica. They're all on the same page when it comes to those two topics. All peace, love, and happiness when it comes to those two topics. You'd think there'd be a little bit more competition. It's kind of revealing that those two things aren't touched by anybody.
So wasn't it the Prime Minister of Canada, the ex-Prime Minister of Canada, to make a huge campaign trying to disclose the evidence that the government had on UFOs after he stepped down, of course? He didn't go anywhere, and he was the ex-president of Canada. You had vice presidents, I think, in France, also did the same thing to no avail. No one beyond the community that looks into it.
Ministers too. Sorry.
What are we supposed to do about it? Several generals.
I said several generals and foreign ministers and political consultants of various levels. Well-educated, long-time career guys with PhDs and security clearances. They have all been coming out recently, and it's no news apparently, but it sure is interesting when you kind of connect the dots.
Okay.
And to your point, Hedlis, of looking at what they do in regards to how they cooperate rather than what they say, right? That's a big practice, I think, that we can all better our observations with.
Sure. And you see all these communities that are completely obsessed with UPA or UFO events or anomalies. And I get baffled when I see this account of a guy that is, I think, is trying to do a decent work.
Oh, where'd he go?
Where is Ethan?
I don't know. Ethan, come back to us. Maybe it died. He was talking about him having battery troubles last time.
Should we call any milk company?
Sorry,
oh no,
sorry.
He's back. Okay, Ethan. So I stopped so that you can listen. So there is this project. There is this project that is called the Tridactyl, and this Tridactyl has been seen by scientists. And why the scientists don't say anything is because they cannot say anything against it. That's why you're not seeing a big flare against this, because they went there and they say, oh, this is going to be beautiful, another one for us to smash. And when they did the testing, this is quite off the chart. Okay, so since we cannot explain it, let's leave it at that. It's just one of those things that they can explain.
I got a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, but where are these communities? Where are these UFO people that love this stuff? Why aren't they backing up this man that is doing honest work?
It's all bread and circus for them. They don't care about this. They hope that it's real, but they're not going to cover it because they don't want to have egg on their face like the first time. So what happened? You remember back in 2017 when they were first talking about that orb thing? They brought this fake corpse into the Mexico house, and they're displaying this fake corpse, and then it was immediately resolved and they said, no, this is a hoax. Well, what if that was bait, right? Because now you can get these people interested in these tridactyl corpses because they think, oh, this is an easy win for us. We could just debunk this right off the bat. And then they show up in Peru and they're like, okay, well, I guess we can't debunk this right off the bat. And so, all the right people are now not talking about this particular event where they found these tridactyl mummies
with eggs, with larvae inside the eggs.
And they confirmed they're not human. So
No.
what are non-human mummies doing on the planet Earth? Can anybody explain that to me? And nobody's been able to do that.
Yeah, but I don't see those headlines saying, not even in the alternative community, saying,
Nope.
we've proven ETs exist, or at least that there is a being on Earth that it's not human and it's bipedal, has eggs, but probably is intelligent, that we see possible representations of it in art in very ancient sites and in different places of the world.
Elongated skull.
The larva culture that I have never associated, because I didn't know about tridactyls, but this larva association, the mention of the larva in the Stargate original movie, the larva that was used and kept. So we don't know what's the real thing, because there's a lot of this, and I don't understand why people are not going crazy supporting this man. I really don't understand.
There's something I heard for a long time in regards to disclosure, what they call, right? Is the idea that humanity is not ready. And I almost feel like, well, how would they know? Are we that superstitious? Well, maybe the one way to prove to them that humanity is ready, if we stop following orders. Right? Namely, the order followers who are engaging in state murder. What if one day they stop obeying the state? I know it's a wild thought, but I feel like,
no, it isn't.
How could we prove we're ready? But the best way would be like, nah, we ain't listening to you no more.
Look, if you send the army to war and the army say, sorry, we will not go. We refuse to go there and kill someone that has a family, is another guy just like me, is just being brought to there because of the same reasons that I'm being brought to there. So I refuse to fight. And then what we'll do? Tell me. They're stuck.
Well,
Yeah,
then
we're at
then
that point right now with the United
themselves, right?
We're at that point right now with the United States. Nobody's going to war. It doesn't matter what war they declare. We're not going there. Bullshit. You're not taking
Yeah, but there is a part of the agenda.
The United States is almost there, but I think there's enough ignorant, people that want to experience that type of reason, that type of thing for ignorant reasons, that you can find order followers enough. But you're right, Headless. It is. I think most people are onto their trickery. Like, wait, you lied about Vietnam and on and on and on. So I'm not falling for now. You want me to go to Greenland or what have you? Excuse me.
They've got about 72 hours of lie time. 72 hours. And then after that, people fucking find out. So what the fuck are they going to do for their next war?
Yeah, but why are this agenda, mainly with 2 or 3 presidents from the Europe, that are pushing for inflaming this conflict? There is a huge interest behind these people trying to push this. Now threatening to bring NATO weapons into Ukraine as a pressure to say, if you don't comply, we'll start shooting.
There's already NATO weapons there. Oh, you mean NATO like supplied weapons rather than country supplied weapons? Excuse me.
Exactly. They are pushing this narrative as they see that they failed already 3 or 4 times to cause the war. Of course, because this is all a stage. I don't buy any of it, but I'm just following the set of events as anyone.
Well, I don't know about this war, but every war is an external war as much as it is an internal war, right? And that's like the bigger picture cooperation behind the scenes that Headless you remarked on, and we all know
Ethan,
that has gone down in different ways. Please.
That's called progressive socialism. It was pioneered by the that's what it's called. It was pioneered by the Fabian Socialist Society back in the late
Sure. No, I laugh
early
because
1900s.
there's no. I don't mean to laugh at your idea. I mean to laugh how they got us twisted.
Right.
Sure.
But this is the progressive era. It was sort of enthroned in these roundtable groups back during that time period, and those roundtable groups haven't gone anywhere. Those are the same ones ruling us today. Their idea is to integrate the world governments into a single thing. That was started with. Go ahead. I
I
forgot.
was
It'll
going
come
to say,
back.
every time I see the label progressive, I'm like, are you removing any laws? If you're not being progressive. I
Right.
think, because we have instituted way too many laws for like reasons that substitute true morality, right? Like all these variations of these cultural variations of our moral perception, as you mentioned earlier, Ricardo, I think come from these control systems that influence our perspective on really what should be summation morality. Like, don't steal from me, don't mess with my people. There's no the basic, and so, not that there isn't
Do to others as you wish to be done to you. That it's very
right, but
simple.
saying
It's
it
very
really
simple.
comes down to just very simple comprehension. As soon as institutions disappear, this is a very much understood practical thing with people. Don't cross my line, and usually it's essentially the theft of one being from
Yeah,
another.
but then you have much more land than the guy next to you, and that's unfair. And then the guy convinced 2 or 3 guys that said, "Look, he has a lot of land. You, like me, has a little bit less land. So let's force him to give a little bit of land to each one of us, and we all get the same land." And then comes another and say, "Oh, you 5 now have more land than I have land." And so the process never ends because no one is ever happy, because there's no possibility of equity. There's no chance to do that because some will always have more than others.
Yeah, with institutions putting this forth, it always is going to be steered for us to think that way, and not
Okay,
just
let's give
not lose, not have everyone not lose instead of everyone trying to win.
Sure. Let's give Headless. He has half an hour for his point only.
That's fine. No, I just wanted to bring home the point because, again, nobody's talking about this. That it barely has any. Well, it's got 264,000 views, but that's really not that much when you think about the scale of this thing. It says, breaking at first glance at Raphael, which is said to be the fetus found inside a pregnant tridactyl mummy.
Yeah, but this is incredible history. He has a large following. If you go to the actual Tridactyl page, it has 400 followers and very few views. That's why this has so many views.
But yeah, that's still nothing compared to the amount of weight that this story actually has. We've got alien mummies, confirmed non-human mummies with fetuses inside of them.
Sure.
You'd think that would be everywhere.
Exactly.
Do you remember the case with the,
and I feel like it's long been suggested. It's long been suggestions that they were taught by Star Brothers, right? Their teachers were from elsewhere, and there they are.
This is all confirmation, and yet nobody's talking about it. It's insane to me. It's like this should be okay. What was the Iceman's name? Otzi the Iceman?
Otzi.
Remember how many years they got out of that story? But they're not even talking about this.
No, not at all. Not at all. Can you show the actual Tridactyl page so people can see where the actual page of the guy is?
I just looked
need to
it
write
up.
Tridactyl.
Okay. I'm looking. Go ahead and talk. I'll find it.
It's so hard for people to grasp and so easy for people to mock. This especially, but anything, right? So I think that's people just are easy to mock at things.
Sure, but there's no mocking or accepting in this. It's just, okay, let's check the evidence. Who has looked into this?
Right, but
what were the results? It's a fact. So if it is a fact,
if
let's
you're
proceed.
Open-minded, if you've been pursuing a Moist mind state to be nonpartisan, but I think a lot of people are so judgmental of anything pertaining to this subject that they just assume that you're biased when they are.
Because when I start looking into it, obviously the first look is, wow, another mock-up, another creature, someone trying to make a profit out of this stuff. But then I started looking, yeah. Then but I went looking. I just didn't give up, right? Let's give it a chance. Let's see.
Yep.
Everything deserves that chance.
That's being skeptical of skepticism.
And so I saw the fellow presenting, this scientists have been in, this team have been here, this team have been here, these are the results, and so on. So considering that we don't even have tests for this being, whatever it is, right? And this being is not a mammal. His joints are opposite to ours. He has eggs instead. Okay, the platypus also has eggs, but I'm not putting a connection here. This has eggs with larvae, not with a small platypus inside of it. So there is some kind of metamorphosis that has to happen in here. So
this whole repression of this idea is most of the videos that I've been able to see on the subject are still in Spanish, which is not a big thing, but it's just a subtle point that there is not this whole promotion of it widely. There would be more so if it was in English too.
I can't even find it. I can't find his page. If you could send me a link to it, I could find it there.
Sure, I will do it right now.
It's that far down. But I'll tell you what, like, there's lots of different mummy posts that get, 50,000 views, 75,000 views. But it's like none of that is this stuff. Like, most of it's not even being looked at. They're just suppressing it like hell.
Will you break down your idea, Headless?
Sure. While I look for this, you can start.
Yeah. The whole idea behind this was going to be the response that I had for a lot of this stuff is that these are basically the cycles of history, right? You've got two different forces on either end, kind of making this, fourfold energy chart, right? So you've got order, chaos, and strength and weakness. And so all society sort of follows along these orders. If you're trying to create order by exerting a lot of strength onto a population, it's going to make that population weak. They're not going to have as much will. It's going to be, a tyrannical system, and that weakness is going to then transform into chaos. And that chaos has to have something else act upon it to return back into order. And so this is why you see these energy vacuums when it comes to, leaders leaving office and another strong man taking their place. It's sort of like this constant return to it. There was a good example on the latest episode of The Last of Us where they're showing this guy who quits being a Fed to become a rebel leader, right? And then once the rebel leader completely deposed the Feds, he was doing the same exact torture bullshit that the Feds were doing to his group. 10 years down the line. And so you have the same return to this idea, well, maybe if we're strong enough, we can return order, but it's not about the strength. It has to do with the harmony, the forces in society that actually make up a society. And you've got to have them in harmony and balance. So that brings me to I can't get these image files to change. I gotta figure out how to do that. Let me see. Did you find it yet?
Yeah. I'm going to send you the link right now to X.
Okay.
That's a great cycle. And I wonder if we just somehow can institute the idea of not losing rather than winning, if there's some steadiness in that cycle. But somewhere along the line, there's always someone looking to win.
Well, if you understand where the order comes from in society, which is like this basic element. You've got the top element, the air element, being represented by learning, education, the priesthood, religion. All of that stuff is like the repository of memory. And then you've got the water element, which would be commercial. That would be the money supply. That would be the people who are doing the banking, And then you've got on the bottom, that would be the earth element. That's the labor force, right? And then on the other side, you've got the military, which is the fire element. And ancient man understood society to work in those castes, right? They actually tried to make those things balanced in a tribal way. This is why the gods were so important back then, is because each tribe, each city had their own form of gods and religion that would support harmony of those forces in their society, because they understood the priesthood actually came from places, right? People who were part of those places were transferred over to other places and they got to work as a priest. So a lot of the religion in Greece and in Rome, all of that stuff came through Byblos. It came through Canaan. a lot of the Canaanites were priests, and the priest class really brought the stories of, ancient Greek gods and stuff all around the world with them, because that's what they were employed to do. This is where you get the Druids too. So these people were employed in the caste system that existed back then, and they tried to maintain a harmony using the understanding of these different forces. Well, as you know, it didn't really play out that way for very much longer. They decided to put a different order in place. They wanted this, Abrahamic system instead. But it all came through the priest class, through the idea of manipulating the education systems that they had in place. But if you think about it, that is a necessary caste. You have to have sort of the priest class be able to transmit the knowledge and memory of a society to future generations. You just have to have them in balance. But once that priest class is off, all the rest of the other groups forget about where they come from and what their job is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the job of the priesthood to keep all of those things straight. They just don't, because obviously we've got a Supreme Court that's more beholden to corporations than they are to any of the people that live around them. Judges would be a part of that
Or
priest
whoever
class too.
gets them a nice big.
Right.
No. I would say that both religion and government, as we can see from far back in history, they always adapt in order to try and keep that control of that will that you're showing there and keep it on the strong side. But invariably, it will fall into the other side and return the circle. And they need to keep adapting. Just look at the Catholic Church. How many times have they adapted to the times to keep people into their circle?
They do.
About governments.
Here's how they do it. They scare you into believing that there's a threat, that they are the only ones who can address them. And you look at the process
reaction
church,
solution.
Right? You look at the process church of the final judgment going around committing murders all over the place. We need government to stop all of these people that government is supporting. And so they would have operations like this and Operation Gladio. I mean, that was all over Europe. They just had to keep the population scared so that they would keep running back to the government to protect them. And that's how the whole system works.
And accept everything the government was dictating.
There are black sheep out there.
A perfect example of the war, that's the external war perceived as, but it's actually an internal war to keep people afraid, to keep people obedient, and ultimately listening to institutions and not saying no.
And unplugging them. They are unplugging people. They are disconnecting them to any kind of actual awareness, as you were describing. They are removing the awareness of people. Because while you are concerned in this, what takes hold you is your reptilian brain. Your Broca's brain is what takes control in when you are threatened. It's what decides that if you turn into a rabid animal and react, or you cowered into a corner, as 90% of plus the population does. So they are actively using not only frequencies through radio, television, music, everything they can. And I'm sorry that I'm getting a little bit sidetracked here, but they're using everything they can to keep you on that Broca's brain, because they don't want you to use your interface. So it's no accident that you find an entire book speaking about the Broca's brain done by Carl Sagan back then, because he was asked to look and to tell us in a way that we understand how this works so that we can use it properly. And he created a book where he shows everything about it, how it works, how it's affected. And that's how I think that they keep most of the control, is by having us in this scenario. You don't go to the news and say, wonderful thing, this old lady on a wheelchair suddenly did something and she started walking, or we saved the little kitty from, I'm just extrapolating, but you understand my point. It's never a good thing. It's always a bad thing. And when they give the baddest of the news, immediately after they finish the sentence, there is no emotion. There is, and now for the games. and now for sports, or now for a break. So there is never any contemplation after they say it. It's like you being in the army, and the guy gets to the other one and says, look, the father of one of your guys in the battalion has died. Do you want me to go there, or do you say that to him? Hey, how I'm going to say that to the guy? So he makes a huge parade with every one of the soldiers and says, who has a father, please step forward. And so he says, you, number 37, step backwards, you no longer have a father. So it's this kind of lack of any kind of empathy, any kind of emotional context that keeps us focused in this reptilian brain that is action reaction. So either you, as I said, either you react or you cower, and most people will cower under this fear, and the brain keep losing its ability to be inquisitive, of questioning, of curiosity, of creativity. All of this is deleted because they are not using the interface that they were born with. Sorry for the rant or whatever it was.
Oh, that's a great point. I think that people lacking empathy are thus also lacking imagination. And Einstein said that's the power, right? It was not in his education, but in his imagination. And so when people lose empathy, I think we lose insight. And that's to that Moism idea. It's really extending empathy for all, right? And trying to be, in that sense, nonpartisan. Again, I'm sorry to repeat myself. Edless, please.
No. It reminds me that scenes where we see the monks selling something, and there is the student with the items of the temple, and then someone gets there and steals something, and the student wants to hit the guy or do something because he's doing a great job and helping the temple. And so this guy comes and steals, and then comes the master and says, what are you doing? If he wants to steal, let him steal. Let him take what he wants. It's his nature. He has to find his way by himself. It's not up to you to correct anything. So it's this kind of contemplation that, again, that good and evil, the reason behind the action, the context, all of that must be included before any kind of action. I think that's why Karens are such interesting people.
Right. So right here is from the Tridactyl page that you sent me. It says screen grabs from the Inkari Institute Jungle Docs production CT scans accompanying video. I suspect several of the eggs contain fetuses or pig dragons. The inspiration for the Chinese artifact of the same name that depicts fetuses of the being. So this is a piece of Chinese artwork that they labeled as pig dragon, and this is the same feature that you see in these Tridactyl they're not fossils, are they? They're mummies? They're not fossils.
Mummies,
right?
mummies,
Yeah.
they're mummies. But you need to tell people where the Tridactyl is, because you mentioned China, and people might get confused. The
Right. No,
Tridactyl.
that's the artwork that they're
Sure.
their name off of. So that's why they call it a pig dragon, is because it looks like the artwork from China.
Oh, he's been showing a lot of pieces of ancient art that resemble the X-ray or whatever, the CR scan of what is inside the eggs.
Right.
And there's these larvae that are not the being that we are seeing. So that there has to be some kind of metamorphosis or something to then develop that. And what's the host of that metamorphosis, I wonder?
They have to let it crawl in your ear. That's the key right there. The blurry video footage of the face is from an egg that appears to be in a state of hatching, while the digital skull from the scans that are available to the public. The purported fetuses reside in separate eggs. The constant companion theory. We were never alone. I mean, come on.
Arrest my case.
What are we doing?
Drop the microphone. Drop the microphone right now.
Is it because they're like xenomorphs? Do we not want to consider that the aliens are like xenomorphs?
Well, I think it just opens the door to so many things that we would actually stop just not that we shouldn't believe in things, but we would stop believing in things without inquiring into them, right? And then institutions' power would fall off. It will lead to so many things that would rattle the system.
Yeah,
I
these
think
people that are looking for UFOs, they say, no, that's just a mummy that I can touch and test. I'd like is a foggy image of something in the sky. That's what I like. That's what I want to see. Not real ETs. That's too real. I just want to keep imagining that they exist. Not that they exist and have been here, probably all over the world. No.
Are you guys
Well,
following
the
the?
people supposedly, the SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, they are very much on that tip. They're not looking nearby or any sightings. It's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence light years away
Are
somewhere.
you guys following the Elizondo controversy, the most recent one?
No, tell us.
So Lou Elizondo gets up in front of Congress and he holds up a blurry photograph of these two circles on a page, and he's like, look, this is the evidence. And so people did a reverse image search of this and found out it was two fields like overlapping each other that made it look
Yeah.
like there was a shadow.
Oh, I
under it.
know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I saw that.
Are you
Well,
kidding
and
me?
there's the other guy that's long standing in that community, and
Hal
he was
Puthoff.
just accused. What was it?
Hal Puthoff.
No,
He's a Scientologist. He went on Joe Rogan.
There's another guy that's been claiming that he worked at Area 51 for quite some time now, and it just came out, or he was just accused of being an Israeli agent.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that's been known about him for a while, but Hal Puthoff actually put that out on the Joe Rogan show where he refused to mention anything about Scientology. So Hal Puthoff is one of these UFO investigator people, and
That's
the
correct.
entire time they never mentioned anything about Scientology because him and all the rest of the remote viewers come out of Church of Scientology. They're not talking about
So
that one.
Was it simple slander, or is there something to it?
There's something to it because they're training remote viewers inside the Church of Scientology. That seems pretty interesting to me. Like, what else is going on inside there?
Sure, you just have to give
is
them
not,
everything you
proven.
have first, but
the remote viewing is it seems so out there, but it's a proven psychic endeavor that military institutions are not only practicing but have whole people doing. I would propose probably.
And you have to see the practicality of it, because they take everything you have and then they teach you to remote view, and then you can view what they're doing, what you used to have. You see, so.
Well, it's funny too. The Process Church of the Final Judgment is also a Scientologist offshoot. So you've got a lot of Scientology connections that aren't really being examined today.
And those that we don't know.
Right. Well, they've sort of fallen out of favor with the whole Hollywood scene, but that doesn't mean their influence is really diminished.
Oh, yeah. But I've seen a few people that have been there, and their reports are far from being positive. There are some people that get along with it, but most people don't.
No, it's a horrendous corporate cult. I mean, like, the things they do to their members, it seems like if you were going to take an HR department and then make it into a cult, that's what Scientology is. It is the worst of all worlds.
And this is the Moist idea that I mentioned before, or reflects upon it anyway, that you don't need an institutional ritual and institutional rules for your self-development. In fact, it's all up to you. And
Exactly.
that is the most confronting fact to our development, is that it is up to us and us only, not Scientology. No matter how much you pay them, it ain't going to help you in your process. It's going to be, your process may develop, but it's going to be because of you, certainly.
Yeah. And I think the more strict a religion is in these practices, or whatever, association, a group, whatever, a cult, the less valid it is, because this is an individual discovery. It's different for all of us. I believe there's guys probably that only meditate using death metal or something like that. If it works for them, great. The road is completely different for every single one of us, be it in education, in religion, in spirituality, in education. In enlightenment is completely different for all of us. So that's why I like Eastern philosophies, because they are very open. They show that there is not a specific way. There is only the goal is not to reach the destination, but to enjoy the process and the wisdom that will the path towards it will give you. And then you'll finally find that, well, I'm here. I arrived and have this awesome experience. While most people are focused on their goal, just on their goal. They don't see the people that go from A to B on a car. They don't know where they've been to. They only know when they arrived. I arrived. Have you seen the plane? Have you seen the bird? Have you seen the eagle? Have you seen that tree? Have you seen that river, the waterfall? No one saw anything because they're all focused on getting to the destination. And that's not about the destination, because the destination is exactly what we don't know what it is. What we have is right here, right now, is to enjoy every single particle of the second that we have on this environment and see what it provides for us.
Well, I believe that cults like Scientology act as sort of laboratory experimental grounds for unscrupulous psychologists and other things. And you find a lot of the 1950s cults were directly monitored by a lot of published psychologists. Like, what were they doing there? What did they intend to do with all of these different cult members? And these were UFO cults again. Like, who started the UFO cult phenomenon? Well, that was the CIA and NSA when they faked these transmissions over the radio lines to this poor guy who was part of MUFON. And so he starts reporting all of the disinformation that they're feeding him through these fake radio broadcasts. And, you know, he thinks he's onto something because the military has come to him and told him, yeah, you've probably got a hold of aliens. And so that's what spurred on all of these UFO cults to start. And this is all information being fed directly by the government in this regard. So you've got all of this stuff being turned into these psychological laboratories. And there's a lot of, I mean, let's face it, America was founded by cults. You know, cults are not a foreign concept in this country. We've got the Millerites of the 1840s where they sell off all of their stuff up in New England, right? They're convinced by their pastor that the end of the world is coming. And so they sell off all their stuff, and then the end of the world doesn't happen. And so they all join Mormonism and move out to Utah.
They didn't get that point from Obi-Wan. I'm going to go home and rethink my life. No?
It's amazing. I think even the veil of apocalyptic results is more so the death orientation of these cults, if you will, right? Whether it's they're averse of death in some way, that they feel like they're going to live forever, or death is coming next month and we're going to see it, or we're going to go through it in some way. It's just a very strange.
It's never to live in harmony with death.
Right.
You know,
that's right.
None of the cults ever preach that.
It's winning. There's that idea again. It's winning over death rather than not losing at life.
Right.
Much better. Rather than not dying, even if he is released from the body, it's never the not dying.
That's always the big selling point too, is immortality.
Sure.
These cults have immortality to sell.
But in regard to what you were saying, keep in mind, remember 2012. There were very good people explaining this calendar that people didn't care anything about them. Why? Because the world was not ending. But those that were spreading that 2012 was a major event and this and that, those made lots of money, lots of popularity, lots of books, lots of documentaries, lots of everything.
Lots of headlines. They had all the headlines.
And those that were actually doing it correct, like Ian Lungold, for instance, that to me is one of the best in decoding the Mayan calendar, which was just explaining that this was a wave, a cycle that just stopped there. Our calendars stop at some year if they want to go. So we are not going to add infinitum. Well, computers can do that, but when we do it by hand, how many years do you think we had in advance when we do it by hand? Right? And these guys had thousands of years ahead of them that they did by hand.
Right.
So, it's not only, what I mean is the fault is not only from the communicator or the instigator, the fault is from the public because the public prefer the sensationalist matter, the one that allows them to, I don't know, gain some advantage over others because I know the world is going to end, or I don't know.
Think back to that time period in 2012. There's lots of other things they could have been reporting on, but again, they smashed all this stuff across the headlines. 2012 means the end of the world. They knew that it wasn't real, and they only went to the charlatans who were preaching it. I mean, if you want to find out who creates cults, you look no further than the people in charge of the media, because they're constantly making these idiotic stories that cults maximize their following with, because they're not really interested. If it bleeds, it leads.
Exactly. It's conditioned education, conditioned social media, and in the end is all a big theater. And I just want to, one more thing I want to say is, we are talking about this looking into the far distance of the universe. Now, take in account what we just saw with an electromagnetic field on Earth distorting an image or compressing it. So when they point this telescopes, be it by radio or whatever, into the deep space, what are these forces, these immense forces that we know exist around certain structures, are doing to the image that they are capturing? Because we saw the camera sees the same thing that we do. So how can we say it's real? Perhaps we are looking to things that, and we are interpreting them in a certain way, when the image is completely, the source information is completely distorted by these electromagnetic forces. So that's probably why cosmology is failing like never before in the last 5 years. Everything that they believe is real from the Big Bang and all of those stuff, they now don't see any confirmation for it.
Well, Giorgiani was talking about an informational theory where he could prove that certain information has weight. And he says, well, what if that is the dark matter distortions in gravity? He doesn't know, but he's saying, wouldn't that be interesting? But if that was the case, then with the rate of increase of our information supplies and our information processing, we're going to have bigger and bigger of these, information vaults. And if we keep doubling the amount of information that we store, within 20 or 30 years, we're talking about changing the Earth's gravity in certain locations. And that could throw off the orbit. That could, mess with us immensely, because there is a certain weight that information contains. And he used the example of a hard drive that was clear and unformatted versus a hard drive that was formatted and had a bunch of information on it. And he says, if you super chill it, you find that this has a certain degree of warmth that is higher than the other version, and there's no reason for that. It's all just ones and zeros. Well, if you continue on that path, you can actually find that heat or that radiation was generated because of the weight of the object. And so somehow the weight is almost imperceptibly more the more information you store in that thing. But it's non-local. So this is non-local weight being applied. It's kind of weird, but the idea there
Where is it? Where is it?
Right. Where exactly? But where is our consciousness? Because we have non-local consciousness as well. But is there any sort of mass to that non-local consciousness?
Well, it has to be.
Right.
Even if we can't measure it, it has to be. Just keep in mind that you are talking as I am now. And according to tests done to people with the SEG machines and more sophisticated systems to detect electro signals in the brain, the signal to the brain, it happens a fraction of a second after the action is begun. So the action precedes the electromagnetic signal, the electric current in the brain. When I move my arm, my brain only gave the information to my body after I was already moving my arm. Okay, and I think this is as important as a tridactyl. Okay, because I think this is vital to understanding that we are not this. We are using this as we use a gamepad to play a game. this is our gamepad. It's much better than a gamepad because we can actually interact. It's a dream for any gamer, for instance, to be able to enter the game and play the game inside the game. But now we are all inside the game, and some of us live in high mansions and have great lives, and other ones are in the slums down there, as a GTA game, for instance. So I don't see any difference. I think that we are sometimes in the irony of being in a game, playing a game, and in that game we are playing a game, and you can go further. For instance, in GTA 5 you can be in the game and go to an arcade and play a game on an arcade.
I love mini games. It's so good. Think about the movie Inception. I mean, that's basically what we're living in. Is we're living in this incepted reality where we keep jumping between these different dreams, and yet, we're thinking that doesn't do anything to time and space. I think it kind of does, since we already have influence over time and space, and we see that in nature with the random number generators. Well, what are we doing when we're interacting with these games all at the same time, all from different places? There's something that's happening. And if you look at recent studies, they say that the speed of light is slowing down.
Yes.
What does that mean? Are we being used to maintain the simulation that we are currently occupying?
And therefore, why would you say it's slowing down? It's minimal, but it's detectable, right? But why are we slowing down?
How many hours a day do we spend diverted in our attention? We're not looking at the world around us. We're not resolving any of those, quantum entanglements. We're not resolving anything. We're not looking at it. We're looking at our phones. Yeah,
and when we are on our two jobs that we require for us to survive. And so that's very hard.
Attention. It's an interesting concept. If we're used to maintain the structure of this place, and our attention is diverted from doing that, what are we creating?
Sure.
I got a conspiracy. Ricardo, what do you guys ask children at Christmas a certain question?
What question?
What do you want for Christmas?
Right.
And
it builds anticipation.
It's almost, and material. Show me the money, right? It's almost, hey, kid, what do you want? Not, what do you want to give to your mom, right? It's, hey, what do you want for Christmas, right? We just put forth this very materialistic idea. I know it's silly to point to that.
No, it's true.
Child. No, it isn't. But you don't have time to ask the children, what do you want for Christmas? Because when it gets to February, he already told you what she wants for Christmas. That might change in time, but
that's because they see how materialistic every adult is, right? That they're reflective. They're not.
There's the opportunity, and it's the opportunity to have the excuse to have what they want, because there's a time when it's supposed to be gifts. But if there is someone listening or going to listen later, don't judge me, please. But I never gave not on birthday, not on Christmas, I never gave a single present to my daughters, and they are 20 years old, ever.
Wow.
And when it comes to that, I taught them to create the presents. Although they do buy, now they come full of presents and to everyone and so on. But I taught them since little ones, you make a painting, you create a poem, you do a collage, you do pick up flowers. I don't buy flowers. I go on and pick flowers and I make myself the arrangement. Although I think very badly of me, because I think giving flowers is a very stupid thing, because we are killing the flowers. That's what we are doing, right? But there has to be a compromise, because we have to live with one another. But so the poor flowers pay the price. But
the Buddhist would buy the flowers so they don't have to do the act of killing them.
Oh, it's hypocrisy now. Okay.
No, the Buddhists actually do this in several countries. The Muslims will butcher the meat, so they didn't kill the meat.
I thought giving live flowers was a good compromise, but it wasn't.
Well, it's a complicated world with very complicated rules, and not because it has to be so, but because we made it so. Because life is extremely simple to live. The problem is it's conditioned by all of these external factors created by a system that has no interest whatsoever in the self-development of the individual. And so, because everyone that gets enlightenment will not work. Did Buddha work? He didn't, right? Do you see any people that is enlightened work? Well, you can say Dalai Lama works, but well, I bet with you that many people would trade their works for his work. So in terms of load, what I mean is, I'm not discrediting these people. I'm just saying that people have their toll of responsibility for not having interests, for not having curiosities, and by accepting things at face value. To say that I don't have time to go and fact check what I heard doesn't mean that you can go and then spread what you heard without doing that fact check. What you could do is, look, I look at this. What do you think about it? The problem is everyone listened to the same thing, everyone suffers the same condition, and their conclusions are exactly the same. And they eventually, since everyone heard the same thing, it must be true. You see, this is so stupid, but because the source is the same, but that's what happens. Since we all heard the same, then it must be true. So it's very difficult to live this conundrum. It's very hard.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, though. But if you take away the idea that all religions are utterly useless, and you actually see what they can do when they're released to give the real knowledge to people, you see things turn around really quickly.
Yeah.
But that's where we're at. That's what that culture's the rest of society right there is the fact that we're not given the type of knowledge that is freeing and important from religion anymore. You know, why would they want to free you?
There's an expression I've heard many people repeat. I have not found the source of it, but I think it's repeated because it's very valuable and revealing in these patterns that we adopt. Am I back?
Yeah,
culture is downstream. Culture is downstream of government, and government is downstream of religion. And so we get this obedient attitude from our, these institutions that are, really playing us in the end through this stream of repetition, right? Stream of control, through even just patterning that we don't even realize.
Yeah, no, I think we're losing a lot of what these different sources of knowledge and energy could be if they were able to actually become more in line with modern cosmologies, and actually start to accept that, hey, there are certain changes we need to make to these books. It's just not in line with archaeology. It's not in line with reality. Let's take another look at where we're living and what we're doing. And if they took that approach and actually tried to use that to build their own people up, you could see a lot of force for good coming from them. But I don't think they're interested in that. It's just the same old thing to keep the same old thing going.
Yeah, but are people interested in that? Imagine this scenario. This scenario. You offer people what they are planning a long time ago. There is the universal income. Okay? So there is no job for everyone. There is a lot of AI working. There's a lot of machinery, robots, whatever. They are already testing this in some places. So what happens is, if they give a salary that is adequate for people to survive and to live their life as they choose to, where they can explore their creativity, where they can explore whatever they want, they have the time for themselves. I bet with you that 70 to 80% of the population would go mad. They don't want that. Because if you take their job, you take the reason of their life. Because they don't exist. They never knew who they were. They never explored that side of themselves. They're an individual that doesn't know itself. And if you put people in the position where you say, my friend, there is, let's just imagine, $2,000 a month for you. And now you can decide if you want to work or if you want to stay at home and do whatever you want. And you have the money to do so. So this is the principle. The problem is they will use this principle to get a digital ID. And then you have the social credits. And then you have to behave this way. And then you have this limit and that limit. That's the problem. Because they go for the excellent solution that could revolutionize creativity, invention, everything. Because people will have time to discover themselves. It will be a time of enlightenment for the few that will accept that opportunity. Right?
Well, if you think about it, money becomes the rhythm of our lives.
Exactly.
It comes in and goes out, and you can change the rhythm of a person's life with simple monetary policy.
Is the chains, the invisible chains. It's the invisible chains. So where's the freedom if you need the money to exert the freedom that you want to exert?
Right.
I wonder if the people that are going to pursue developing themselves are just going to do it, and whether if they have less money, sure, the likelihood is less. But if they have some money, still, is the likelihood more? I don't know. Like some people choose that way, some people are not, and that's why they have that fracture, as you suggested, Ricardo, where they initially get it and have never faced their shadow, or have never just really considered things outside of the monetary cycle that we're all in, right? And so,
Ethan,
if you ask anyone,
sometimes
I've got
just one thing.
Sorry,
this simple question that is, who are you? What people answer? I'm a mechanic, or no, sorry, that's not what you do. Who are you? Who, me? Oh yeah, I'm a mechanic. I'm the guy that lives like next door. No. Who are you? Most people don't know how to. Well, no one knows how to answer this question, but some of us have tried at least to frame some kind of an answer that is ourselves. Sorry, I interrupt you, Atlas.
Yeah, I was saying there is the solution, and you mentioned it earlier. It's that curiosity and creativity. This is how you show who you are. That expression, the ability to search something out and create something with your hands. That's hugely important when it comes to defining who you are, because now you're doing something that cannot be taken. It's something that exists in form, and this used to be the way of expressing oneself, is to start building, is to start creating, is to start using your mind to connect with the materials around you and express your personality. But do we really even do that anymore? That's I think that's part of a spiritual person. You've got the idea of the Idaean dactyls, which are the hand of Mount Ida, and what they are is the spirits of the Olympic Games. And so you've got the idea of moving and running and doing all of these things in accordance with these spirits of the land that would come forth during the Olympic Games. That's a completely different way of looking at things, but it combines all of the best parts of humanity into action and spiritual natures, and I think it's a beautiful thing that we're kind of missing.
Yeah, the thing is, as Ethan was saying, is people ready? Well, I think the answer is that people will never be ready, and that should never be used as an excuse. Because if there is something to be learned that can radically change the global perspective of things, that should be placed right in front of us, and at a priority, because those that will not follow will eventually be forced to follow because the others have turned that path. And so they that don't care what reality is, as long as they continue to live their lives inside of that bubble of reality, they just don't care what reality is. If they have to accept that there are aliens living among us, if that doesn't change their lives, well, let them live. It's like it's the same thing with immigration. If you think about it, you resist the idea, but then when you give yourself thought, no, but I'm buying on their shop, and that's the guy that's giving me my burger there. That's the guy that serves my coffee there. So you're already living, we already accepted. There is this resistant mechanic, but you're already living in this system. So there's no difference It's just a matter that those that have the possibility, the responsibility to put those things forward are those that are not doing it. And those are the scientists, the governments, the institutions. Those are the responsible, because if I are waiting for the people, that will never happen. They want their small life secure. Everything is known from waking to going to sleep. The same program gives at that hour. If you change the time of the program by something, you're already ruining their lives, because it is schematic.
I got a solution. Glamping. Have you guys ever heard of glamping?
Glamping.
Isn't that hanging out?
It's glamorous camping. And what they do now is they have these big old dome pods that you can put on your property.
Yes.
And they've got these big windows. And what if you do spiritual retreats at these glamping locations to try and get the target audience into a different frame of mind?
Well, if you include the obligation of taking a dose of a good psychotropic to every single one at certain age, then yes, because I think everyone should go by, even if they don't want to know who they are or never had the interest, at that point in time they will be faced with no exit. This is you. Okay,
Who
so
are
at
you
least
retreat?
They have cannabis
sorry,
facilitation.
I didn't
All over the
understand. Sorry.
US.
And even microdosing facilitation of psychedelics here and there in the States now legally.
Yeah, but for this you don't need microdose. You need a normal dose.
No, I'm not saying that's.
I'm ready to
just
go.
saying
Let's do it.
happening, which is neat.
Look, I took my first mushroom. I did a 300-kilometer drive to meet with some university group. I was not in university, but I was attending classes and everything. But I was just mingled. I appeared here and there. So I went to them. They were all together in Algarve. That is near the beach. Not beach, but beach as play sand and sea. Okay, forgive my English. And so when I get there, everyone had already taken it. So they made a huge pot, and I'm kidding. It's like a pot like this that was filled 3/3 of in height of mushrooms. So when I get there, the only thing that I had is a few of them on the bottom and all of the juice. So very stupidly, I decided to take the ones that were there and the juice. So my experience was this. I went to the sand looking for the group. I found the group. I lost my glasses on the sand somewhere. And I only noticed that when we returned to the houses, because with the light, I realized I was not seeing properly, because we are in the darkness in the sand. So in that state, I was able to go back to the sand, and after an hour, miraculously, I found my glasses, which I still attribute to the fact that I was in tune with something, thanks to the experience, because it's impossible to find anything on a beach sand, especially when I didn't know where I was. So, but I did find the glasses, and I do thank the mushrooms for that. And that was my huge experience with a highly dose. But I already had passed by the process of introspection and all of that before, right? So it was not the first time. So it's kind of different. But I think everyone should go through not mushrooms. I would say ayahuasca is probably the best, because DMT is maybe too strong for an experience like that. But an ayahuasca, it's a process. You go for a weekend. Your body will take everything out that it has in it. You'll lose it by back and forward. You throw everything out. Then you go through the process where you cannot escape yourself, and you emerge a new person. If you don't, well, there's always the exception to the rule, but I believe that at least 80% of the persons would be better persons after the experience. Less vice.
Well, I think it comes down to having people accept the idea of maybe win-win-win-win-win scenarios. Instead of saying less winning, you make it more about how many other people can win alongside you. You know, give them that
But
sort of
isn't the new policy that everyone wins? There are no losers.
yeah, but that's not really that meaningful if they don't have any sort of interaction with it. You know, it seems like to me you
No,
set the
it's a
policy,
celebration of mediocrity.
right?
That's what it is.
It's true. And it really does come down to that. The fish rots from the head. If we don't have institutions that want to engage in actually studying new things, the rest of the thought in society stagnates right alongside of it. I mean, look at the book Propaganda by the nephew of Freud, right? He wrote that book in the early 1930s, I believe, and it's still being used today just as effectively. They don't need to evolve. We're falling for the same tricks over and over again.
The beams of what do you call the bottom of the structure that supports it?
It's the foundation.
The foundation.
Right?
The foundations are still the same. So only a few changes are needed. And people look, it's easy to control peace. It's easy to control riots. It's easy because people have all of this. They know that they are building this pressure inside the persons. So if you give them a reason to get out and break windows and burn cars, they will be more than happy that they're what's the name of their molecule that gives pleasure?
Dopamine.
The dopamine will be very high while they're doing this thing. It's like that. Isn't there a series or a movie where there is a one day a year where you can go and kill and do whatever you want?
Purge.
The Purge. Right. It's more or less the same thing. People just need an excuse to go out, to get drunk, to lose control of themselves, and then return to their normal lives as nothing happened. That's what keeps the balance. Is this euphoria of going to a game or going to a party and it makes no sense to me, but that's how people work. I see they work from 9 to 5 and their life starts to happen on Saturday. They hang out with friends, or they go to the movies, or they go to some place, and that's their life. That's it. There's no more meaning between.
Right. And I think that's something that has to be found once you find out who you are, because that is the starting point. If you're going to pursue meaning, you're going to have some sort of place you can measure that from.
Yeah,
which most people don't.
That's why you see this scale of meaning that some seek on a higher God, and you have this mystic that is saying that my meaning is this stone that I'm holding in my hand. And he picked just a random stone, any stone that he could find, and said, this is my meaning. Because as Ethan says, or you, I can't remember you, there is no difference it's all one. So it doesn't matter where you're pointing your attention, because again, it's the externalization instead of the internalization, as Ethan has told me in our conversation. People are always justifying with the external. It's always the others. It's never me, because the me doesn't exist.
Right. Well, imagine if you had a population trained in remote viewing by first or second grade. It's so easy. First or second grader can do it. That's an interesting society. I mean, you're going to have a lot of predictive power just by using the simple methods that they institute in remote viewing, and teaching a lot of people that could change the entire way that the economy works. But we're not thinking about human capital. We're only thinking about machine capital. What can AI do? We're not thinking about
if people were telepathic, even on a personal level, not necessarily in a remote viewing capacity, which is, of course, just as attainable, I would presume. But I think maybe personal telepathy might be more palatable. People who might have tasted it before in their own life. What if people couldn't lie to us, and what if institutions couldn't lie to us specifically when
they wouldn't do that to us?
Yeah.
Right. Well, they wouldn't anymore if we knew about it.
No, we
It's
do
like-
know about it, and they're still going through.
Yeah, well, we do in a big sense know about it, and they still do it. You're absolutely right. But if we knew it overtly, right? If we like really had an acceptance of our own intuitive powers, and they knew that, I think they would lie less.
I got an interesting, probably a bad idea. But what if we get like a team of 60 remote viewers together and we put inside the envelope that they're supposed to be checking the veracity of the politician's speech. And so between the 60 of them, you get a percentage of how true or false any of these statements that they're making are and how they could be lying about it. And then you just use remote viewers like truth detectors to see if anything that they're saying actually has any value. Either they're going to have to reduce the level of speech that they make already to even lower, or maybe they'll have to start telling the truth a little bit more. I don't know, but I mean, it's an idea.
Yeah, but I propose that you do that with 60 babies that you raise to the age that they have the capability to do that, because otherwise, if you put something out there saying, I'm recruiting 60 people, they will all be from agencies.
Well, here's the thing.
infiltration.
You could have ways of filtering people like that out. That would be easy enough. But the whole idea is all you want to do is give people the ratios of how many times you're right versus how many times you're wrong, right? So when you're doing coordinate remote viewing, the people who are doing the remote viewing have no idea what's inside the envelope, right? So you can choose a bunch of people at random and then say, all right, item 1. And then they write their impressions down, they write any drawings down. And then you say item 2, and then they're doing the same thing all the way through. So you've got a pretty good control on what it is they're judging, because they have absolutely no clue what it is they're judging. And you look at the similarities between the work, and it's like, well, that's pretty undeniable. Something's going on here. And you can film the whole process. It would kind of be interesting.
Sure. If you could raise ethically, this is very debatable, because if there is no notion of being excluded from something, or lied about, or knowledge of what is beyond there, I don't think there is that much of an ethic condition besides those that are doing it in our perspective from the outside. But for the child itself, let's imagine we create a child in an environment where there are only top advanced technologies combined with ancient arts, with the most highly people on their skills, and this child is created in this environment by multiple people. All of them have extraordinary things to teach this child. What are the possibilities of that child come out a moron?
Probably good. I don't know.
No, probably he won't be a moron, right? Because you are educating this child, you are telling them that this is not impossible.
Do you know about the old I guess it's a stereotype when it comes to psychics? They're not very smart. Like, the psychics themselves are an open channel because they don't have a lot going on upstairs.
Oh, sure. But I'm saying that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is raise a child without letting him know that that this or that is impossible. Create him with the belief that whatever it is possible. And I'm very curious to know what is the final, because we don't know what is possible, because we are limited as we grow from babies, that this is not possible, that is not possible, that cannot be done. And if we raise someone without that limit, that anything, the child goes to speak 5 years old and says, I want to fly. Of course, I'm going to teach you to do it. There is no impossibles. There's no reason why, if we are all energy and matter, that we cannot achieve if we believe it. There is no limits to that. I don't believe there is. That this body is not a limit, because the spirit is stronger. What governs it is stronger. You don't see bodies rebelling on the street saying, "No, get out of here. Who are you? I'm the body. I'm in control." You don't see that, right? So there is some form of control over this body. People can throw the bodies of top buildings and kill themselves. You don't see the body saying, no, I won't do it. They can do it. They can do harm to their own bodies. So there is no impossibles. If you raise a child in an environment where everything technological, spiritually is possible, you never say that cannot be done. Let's try and do it. How do you choose to do it? How do you feel to do it? I think that we'll see a very different child from one that is raised within the system that everything is controlled. It will be a clash. It will be like being a semigod and a normal human in terms of comparison of a normal child raised in a very strict environment in terms of needs, and
Do you
one that
know?
isn't.
Do you know about the creative writing prompts that they would give little kids as they were first starting school versus when they were leaving school?
No.
You'll love this. So what they would do is they would have an object on a page, and then they would say, describe this object and in as many words as possible, tell us all the different aspects of this thing and imagine that it's doing something. So write a story about that. And they would give this to really young kids, and the really young kids would just like fill up the entire page. All this creative associations, free associations, all these different aspects that they had questions about, they had imagination for, and then they would give the same writing prompt to a person in high school, and they'll get like 3 lines, maybe 1. All I need to do is 1. That's all I need to do.
And that's what's there. It's a line designing a bird,
right?
So
all that creativity just drains right out of them throughout the process of schooling.
Yeah, that's a nice comparison, because it is. I think all the process that we do to children in this system is very limiting. And we can see clearer there in terms of racism, because if you put 2 babies together, they care nothing for their color, absolutely nothing. But you can put the same 2 children in a normal education that follows a racism or some indication of racism as exists everywhere. And when you join them together, there will be a clash. There will be a moment where they have to decide if they engage or try to, how should I say it, not engage. So it is all about what is indoctrinated and not what is. Because what is very simple. Everyone is equal. There is no difference whatsoever, no matter the money, the color, whatever it is. And all of that is learned. All of that is a process that we, no matter how enlightened we are, we pass through. We see a person going in the street with low clothing and doing a job that we know is badly paid, and we immediately consider that person must have a very low education, or is someone that is not very clever, when one thing has no relation to the other. It's just one of those perceptions that is hard to resist. And like this are many more that create this separation between the society that the rich like to justify, because they needed everyone beneath them so that they can continue to be the rich. Because if you are all rich, there are no rich.
Right. But you'd be surprised how many people are willing to give in to the perception of reality that they are only this one thing. They are only this plumber, mechanic, like you were saying.
Sure.
They're so susceptible to that unless they really know who they are. And having that understanding breeds principle.
I agree. What has the Eastern philosophy has to say about this, Ethan?
Well, I mean, it's a daily process, right? I think I think I might have mentioned this before, the sudden transformation or the transformation with a lot of work. But either way, it's going to take a long time is the joke. So sudden could happen, but it's, don't look for it. Don't wait for it, but do the work, and the repetition and the refinement is a process, and patience.
That's not one of the problems with any religion. That is, for instance, let's consider that Buddhism in its freedom is a much better system to create spirituality in a population. So let's instigate Buddhism to the population. Immediately, by doing something that you think you're doing for the good of the population, you are also limiting that population by doing a good action. So it's very complicated to decide what to do, because something has to
Well,
be done.
the decent thing about Buddhism as opposed to
It was a
monotheism.
late, a very
Well,
late.
no, I think you're right, but you're absolutely right in what you say, that institutions will use the collective's overall belief system to steer and predict. Absolutely, Buddhist and otherwise. I was just going to add on that the monotheism really makes it a much more guarantor of their predictions and their steering, to be sure of which direction or which implication they're trying to do. Much easier, because it just says it right there. Monothematic. The monotheism leads to monothematic thinking, whereas Buddhism sometimes, I don't know. You don't know which way.
Yeah, but tell me one religion that is monotheistic.
Well, all religions are monotheistic in one sense or another. What really is the crux of monotheism is not the belief in one God, it's the demand in one perspective of God. That's the really monotheism distinction that is problematic, right? Because one God, sure, lovely, but one way to perceive God, problem. That sets up a tit for tat problem, as we see for the last 2,000 years, that we haven't been able to get out of. So it's not the monotheism is kind of the wrong definition, because it's not one Godism, because they all worship the same God. The three Abrahamic religions, that is, it's the one way to perceive, and that's what is fought over, and that's there's problems with. I just mean to build on what you're saying.
Sure. No. That was an excellent question to what I was not ready for, because I was on another point. Excellent. Because what my point was,
given a lot of thought to the monotheism.
My point was, they claim to be monotheistic, but how many of those that claim to be monotheistic are monotheistic? Because if you go to Christianity, if you go to Catholic Church, they claim to be monotheistic, but then you have the Holy Mary, then you have Jesus, then you have the Holy Ghost. So it is a mash.
One way perception of things. It's not really the one God, right? Truly, when you look at the different energies, the Trinity, even, it's really a one-way perception for sure. Good point.
I think going back into the history of where these things came from really cures a lot of that. So if you look at the Baal cycle, all those epithets for Baal that they use in that cycle, they use for God in Proverbs. So it was a direct ripoff. And when you understand that they were just taking a lot of these other cultural myths, it starts to diminish a little bit of the fervor that you have in the eschatology, because it's all kind of made up.
You can see the political inferences and demands that went into these belief systems, right? That it was more how to get people to control how people see the world, not to get them into correct alignment with the one God.
Sure, that's why you see the beginnings of the Catholic Church. They were still, at least in Europe, they were, because we're not savages. In the Americas it was different, but in the Americas, in the Europe, because we're not savages and we're already implying some Christianism, they had to put up with the pagan cults for a long time and very slowly eradicating them. Instead, that's one of the reasons why they put their churches, their chapels, where the ancient pagan sites were. Well, at least this is a public one, not one of the most important in my case, but that was important too, because people are used to go to those same places. So
Ricardo, I think it's worse. I think they gained control every riot. So they would have these riots occasionally in Rome and all these different big cities, Alexandria. And anytime there was a riot, the Christians would go over to these pagan temples and just tear them down, tear them to the ground, and just make sure that people would forget about them. And it's like, how could they get away with it? And I think people weren't thinking in terms of the type of modern cults that we have today, because back then people were part of cults as part of their family tradition, right? So, what if they were part of a different clan group, they would worship at this temple. If they were part of this other clan group, they would go to that temple. And it wasn't thought of as being sort of mutually exclusive or battling against each other, because everybody had kind of their own gods. And so from that point to Christianity, where they're like, we have the one God, it's like, this doesn't even match up with what they understood about the gods back then. So they didn't even see it coming, really. They were like, why would you destroy that temple? What did that temple ever do to you? But they didn't get the full theological implication, is if you can be the one God above all these other cults, you can rule their minds forever. And that
Yeah.
was the real purpose and the real goal behind all of these Abrahamic religions, is to
It's control.
inject
It's
that thought.
control.
Yeah.
It's all about control.
when you get into the anthropology of it, it's like everybody's using this term Yahweh. What does that even mean? It's like saying God, like that's what they would use in certain places. They would say Yahweh as if it was a string of other gods. They would use tons of
Sure.
epithets in their curses and their blessings. That was part of life back then, is you would call upon these different names to come inhabit your party or whatever.
I came from a Catholic school, so one of the first things that I noticed is one of the commandments. I'm not talking about the 10 commandments, but one of the commandments of the Bible is you will have no other images of me or representations of anything on the sky or beneath it, and so on. And what we see in every single Catholic church, there are these saints that are clearly, as I was explained many years ago, each one of these saints, because of the adoration that they receive, there is a mass of energy that someone calls a spirit, that it's created behind them, this energy that is
Egregore.
creating on. Yeah, so because of that devotion, all of this is idolatry. Mary was a normal woman that had many children after Jesus and had a normal life. He was no saint. She was chosen as many others were. In fact, the one that had John was also a chosen woman. So there is no reason to make this mother of all of us all of the sudden, because she was the one chosen to have Christ. Like she was a saint. She wasn't. Not even in the scriptures. She wasn't.
Well, they had to have the control, and that goes into the syncretism. So all of these ideas in the Bible syncretized very well with the surrounding cultures. A lot of what it was from their books. But the whole idea was, if we use these stories in these ways, we can actually take over their churches. And so
Exactly.
that's why they would have things like Mary, representing Isis. And so people were like, yeah, I recognize Isis and Horus and Osiris in that story. We can go with that. But it wasn't meant to genuinely syncretize with all the other religions. It was meant to, sort of eat them.
Overthrown them, yeah. Eat them. That's much better, yeah.
That's why Catholic means universal, is because they thought they had all the narratives in one place where they could acquire all the other religions.
Yeah,
Did you see
and
this the Mayans?
Yeah.
Have you looked into the Hunab Ku?
No.
The Hunab Ku of the Mayans was their Christian god. After they were taken over by the Catholic Church.
Sure.
The Catholic Church decides to create a new mythology for them using their own native culture, and that symbol was the Hunab Ku, and they lifted that above all the other symbols. They've been doing that for thousands of years. That's what they do when they come into places, is that they change the religion over to this one form.
Sure. And according to their own scriptures and their own methods, when you see these large arrays of people carrying those large saints on those wood planks, carrying them, this is not in terms of Catholic Church at all. This is a completely different ritual that everyone attunes to, thinking it is Catholic, but it isn't. And we've seen a few interesting ones this year because they are no longer they are no longer exclusively showing us the saints all pretty and white and gold, they are now putting some very weird statues that people are transporting in these rituals that doesn't look like very Christian to me. But well, it isn't Christian from the beginning. But now they are very ugly statues. This almost devilish, like that they are using.
Uglification.
Yeah,
Nick did a whole series on the parade in Italy, where it's just nothing but these demonic figures.
exactly.
And it was a former Catholic festival, and they're like, "Well, what's going on here?" But all of the main families who put it on are these the black nobility. There you go. He's got it right there. Vergil. So
Vergil.
yeah, and it's insane. Like the uglification of Europe has really just taken root all over America too. It's like all of the architecture lost its flair. It's all just brutalism. You know, you don't have any of the classical architecture anymore being built. It's just all brutalist garbage. And you look at the art, it's all this modern art that's just not good. And it's the uglification of everything. I think it's most evident in the UN's meditation room. Have you ever seen pictures of that place?
No.
So this was completed in the 1970s. It's this big stone slab with all of these modern pieces of art around it. This is where you're supposed to meditate. It's a room that instantly causes anxiety in anybody who enters it. It is disgusting, right?
So it's
just
perfect for meditating.
right.
It's logical.
And then on the wall, they have this abstract art of all of these shapes. But if you look at the shapes directly, you can see the Grim Reaper's scythe just front and center in the picture. And it's like, so this is a monument to death that you're showing us right here.
Yeah.
And you're hiding it behind this thin veil of modern art and modern architecture. And that's sort of the whole symbol for what they've been giving us in terms of artwork. That's what they're going to pay for now on, is that garbage, that corporate slop.
Yeah, that's what we were talking before starting recording, that you create a painting, right? With all the mastery of the old arts, and you create a beautiful painting, and you go and everyone looks at that. But you go, a guy on a string putting some paint while he's passing by in speed and squirting all over the canvas. I was trying to remember the name. You put it for sale for 10 million. And it has 3 guys wanting to buy it. It's again the celebration of mediocrity. It's just unbelievable. Where is the craftsmanship? Where is the art?
Did you see the recent sculpture they put up in I think it's right outside of the stock market in New York City?
I see. Yeah.
It's this great big fat black woman with their hands on her hips. She looks like she's about to attack some poor manager at some store. And we're supposed to take this as art. It's a giant bronze sculpture of a person that you wouldn't want to run into in real life. She looks angry for no particular reason. I think it's called the Angry Black Woman or something. And she's just standing there judging people in her fatness. It's like, what are we supposed to? This is an art. This is pure uglification.
Is it true that there is a building with a lizard coming out from the ground with a child in the mouth? The CRF Commission or something like that, or the trade, it's the economical trade building in the US. I know this was shown a couple of years ago. They created this metallic statue of a reptilian creature coming from the ground with a child in the mouth. And this is in the street, in the front of the building.
Is that the CFR you're thinking of?
Oh, yeah, probably. It's something like that. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's a long time ago, 2 years or so.
I'm looking up CFR sculpture.
You better put a lizard with children in the mouth statue or something like that.
With child.
It reminded me immediately of the Denver airport, if I'm not mistaken.
Yup.
Where you have all the apocalyptic scenes of a modern world being destroyed by a cataclysm. You have the Grim Reaper there too. And this is their devotion to death is quite astonishing. And if you think about it, it is death that keeps them in control, because they need death to control numbers. They need death for the people don't grow enough in order to realize beyond the veil. So there's many reasons.
It's so Punic. If you look at Punic art, it is weird and disturbing and off-putting, and they put out in front of their toffets, they put out the sign of Tanit, right?
Yeah.
This was in the old world, and this was their form of art, was the tombstone. So the tombstone was their form of art that they would put in front of the place where they would sacrifice their babies. And when you get into this art style, it's like, what the hell are you trying to show me here? This triangle woman. I think what they were showing is the same idea that some figures in DMT are like pure geometry. Like they don't really have a form. It's like a triangle shape or something like that. And so this Tanit is just a triangle with a little circle on top with these two little peg legs and peg arms. And it just looks like nothing, but it's in all of these really complex forms of art. And it's like, what is this about? And I think they were having these full-blown delusions around this obsession with death. And these are the burning places where they would take their children or poor people's children, because they would often pay people to take their child over to these toffets.
Yeah, they most of them wouldn't sacrifice their own children. They'll go to the poor people and they buy for them, and they sacrifice those children. Yeah, then they burn them alive.
And then
One
you
of the
think
rituals
about
is to burn them alive. Yeah.
what they're doing with all these aborted fetuses, and you got to ask yourself, hey, is this still going on here? Are they still using these things for sacrifice? And I think they probably are, man. It's a free supply, and if they've got access to them, why wouldn't they do that?
Yeah,
If they
look,
you know the term McCarthy?
No.
McCarthy is the last name. Like it's an Irish last name. It means from Carthage. Cartagena over in Spain. All those people with those stone masks.
That's
all Carthaginian. Like there's so many traces of Carthage all over through Spain, up into Europe, all over the place.
Yeah, in Portugal, in the north, a lot of that. Yeah.
These were all places that had Canaanite outposts, and they just sort of seamlessly integrate and create these different franchise societies. This is why you have the same kind of government structure all over the place. It's because it's the old families from Carthage. They just never went anywhere. That's the law of the sea. They carry that law of the sea everywhere. You look at the sea empires, England, America, they've got the same Carthaginian influence in their governments.
Yeah, but they are doing much more awful ports. The ports used to be more beautiful than they are now.
I think it's an ugly civilization, and we're seeing, what happens when their sacrifices stop working. What do you see?
Do the sacrifice work, or it's just for their own belief system?
I don't know what they are.
It's a self-actuation system. If you believe that they work and they give you benefit, if you actually believe it, it might happen. Like someone that goes to church believing that he's going to be healed, and that belief healed them.
What
and
if
the excuse it was the place.
What if they're related to these mummies?
What if they have the larvae of one of these mummies?
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So tell me, what is the most logical answer to at least, okay, I'm going to put it mildly, just very small amount of time, 6,000 years of time. What put them in control for this long? They would have many inner fights in India and other places. They had many inner fights, but it's the same system. So how is it possible to keep even 1,000 years of control? Is it through generations? Is the education so strict? Is the plan so strict? Is there a commander so awful that everyone followed the plan? It's weird.
What about disassociation? Right? What if you're dealing with a bunch of DID people who have a certain spirit that governs over their bodies? What if they are like NPCs?
Oh, they do those ceremonies to take
that's what I'm saying.
Spirit. Yeah, they do it. No.
That's what you were just telling me about the king. Tell the audience about the first king of Portugal.
Well, the first king of Portugal, Afonso Henriques, was born as a cripple boy. And there was interest by the Templars to obtain territory in Portugal. And so Gualdim Pais, that was the master Templar of this area of the world, which means is one of the highest learned in secrets of the Templar order, if not the most at that time, because that's the only one that appears. He goes and proposes to this daughter of a queen, a bastard daughter of a queen, living in a small piece of land in what is now Oporto. That's when the vine of Oporto comes from. It was called Portucale. That's why there's still a brand that, I believe there is in the United States, that is still called Portucale. That means the Porto Harbor. That's what it means. So he goes to her and says, look, if I can heal your son, would you give it to me and allow me to raise him and educate him? And she, at that point in history, you have a crippled son, you make another. I'm sorry if I seem insensible, but that's what you do. That one is crippled. Let's see how long he lives, and we'll just make another just right now, because let's see. And so he takes the child, and he returns 2 weeks after, with the boy healed, which is in itself already fantastic. So that boy was raised and educated by the order, and by the age of 11, according to the story, he asked to be taken to the main building of the Templars, the cathedral in Spain, where he knighted himself as king. And this is highly symbolic, because by knighting himself, he was saying to the king of Castile that he doesn't recognize anyone above him but God. That's why there is no one capable of knighting him but himself at 11 years old, right? And so imagine a people that is living a very good life under the Moor control, a very good life. There is no feudalism. The land is of the people. The only thing that the Moors ask is 10% of any money that you make. So the Moors were quite happy to have the Christians there because they were giving them taxes. And if the Christians wish to stop pay the tax, they just have to say, I'm converted to Islam. But they were happy to have them because they were paying the 10%. So that's a good business.
No usury.
Exactly. So the land was of the people. And now appears this king. This is the strangest story, because now appears this wannabe king, backed by an army of Templars. And he's saying to the people, it's time to get back to the old good days of Christianity and feudalism, where you're going all to serve me and the other lords and have no land and still have to give 10% of everything you produce on your small portions of land. And people look at this and thought, wow, that's much better than being with the Moors. It makes no sense. So why did people help this guy? There has to be some sort of kind of Hitler speech or something like that.
Mass mind control.
Mass hypnotism. That's what I'm going to say. Some kind of sound technology or whatever that drive these peasants not only mad, but terrible weapons of war. Because with pitchforks, they defeated armies 7 times larger than they. 7 times with pitchforks on a small hill, defending from attacked by all sides, with armies with heavy equipment to launch things against them, no fortified, and they still won every single battle, every single one. So there was no reason for the public to go to their side, and it went. There was no reason for them to win the battles, and they won. There's no reason for a crippled child in the 11th century to be healed in 2 weeks, and he was. There's no reason for a guy like Afonso Henriques to be able to hold a sword that, in our records, let me see in pounds, so 16 kilos is 32 pounds. Do you imagine what is to do a battle with a 32-pound sword in your hand? What kind of a man are you? Look, my katana weighs 1.5 kilos, and you have to control the weight. No matter how strong you are, you have to control the weight. Now we're talking that 1.5 kilos is 3 pounds, not 32 pounds.
Right.
And you're still wearing armor that weighs 80 pounds. And you still run, and you still fight, and you don't even take the armor when you go to rest, because it's a lot of trouble to take and to put on again. So you got weeks with that thing on. Imagine how strong these people were when they were without the mail and the 40 pounds of weight.
Yeah.
They're just beasts of men. They were beasts of men. But the point is, they controlled the territory. They created this highly ritualized, highly esoteric types of buildings where they're doing their own rituals. The one that I have documented in my channel, the Convent of Christ, has a church that was designed specifically so that they could attend the mass. That's how you call the mass while on a horse. This roundabout where each horse head would be inside an arch, and the mass was be given in there, so they were inside the church on a horse, and beneath that structure there is an hypogeum where was what they call the Grail. And I'm not saying there is a physical Grail, there is a technological Grail. I'm just saying what they said. There was a Grail stored there for a while on that structure. It's on their records, right? So but the funny thing, and probably this is why you told me to say this story, is that Portugal is in fact on the chart that was created with the constitution of the country. On the seal you can read Portugal, which translates in English to for you Grail, and that's how the name Portugal comes from. It's from this seal where it's written for you Grail. So Portugal, you were telling that the Americas were founded by esoterics and these organizations. Portugal is a Templar country, has always been. It's the place where they come when they were persecuted. The 3 times they were persecuted in Europe, that's where they came into. The king here gave them all of the support, gave them land, everything. And it still is. It's a country that's been neutral from all wars, received money from both sides on every single war, and is the place where they put the Council of Foreign Relations, which has nothing to do with Portugal. It's the place where the Capra organization, there is the largest heathen, in fact, it's completely off the charts right now, of the association they call the Vampiric Community.
Yep.
So it is the hub for all of these great things. We used to be we are only the country that have the largest thing, the largest super mall, the largest bridge, and we're very small. The ones that have more MB cash machines per inhabitant, they eradicated, I believe, 7,000 machines, and we still have an incredible amount all over the country. So it makes no sense whatsoever. But the point is, this is a country that is theirs. But I would say that all Europe was created by them. Obviously, you just look into Saint-Germain and you see the work that they've done to create the Europe before the First World War was all created by the help of these agents, including Saint-Germain. So the tricked kings worked double sides, put this against that and that in favor of that. And it is the same thing. In fact, I think that agents today don't have the freedom that they had back then.
Who discovered America? It was Portugal. You know?
Well, we did confirm that it was there, as it was being said. Yes.
These people had the roots to go to North America, and they knew it because they had been there lots and lots of times.
Yes.
And they're the ones who discovered it, right? These are the Templars, that they have flags of Native American tribes that are the Templar flag. So What are we really saying here? And you're the guys who discovered America conveniently. So it all goes back to Punic times. It all goes back to Carthage. Carthage had these trade routes. They were fully on all of this stuff. And after Rome smashed them to bits, they decided to take over the mystery schools. And through the mystery schools, they would produce works like the Bible and spread these things. And the idea there was that they could actually have control over people by using their ancestral memories against them. And what did they do in Portugal? They accessed those ancestral memories of those farmers and reawakened them into these warriors.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Well, they used these symbols that were deeply ingrained in their souls. They were the first anthropologists. They knew this stuff by heart. And
Wood
that's why
pitchforks, that's what they had. And sticks.
I know. It's insane. But I mean, I'm telling you, that's the power of these ancestral symbols. And they really, really work to activate that spirit inside of people. And they understood this stuff. And
the funny is, there's not one historian that says this is the last example in history that we have of berserkers. Because that's what they were. They were berserkers. There's no way a man in conscious of his abilities would see a gigantic thousands and thousands of units surrounding. I'm just citing this first one battle. They are in a small hill, and the Spanish army goes all around them until the eyes can see. Okay, they were in a scale of 7-1 or something like that, and from that small hill, they defeated 2/3 of that army. And so the king decided the Spanish king decided, okay, these guys are crazy. Let's go home and rethink our lives. So let's not continue. Something was going on in there.
The first time that Rome got sacked, it was by the Saxons. And the Saxons were the first people with chainmail armor back in 300 something BC, right? And they went in there with no pants on, because their big thing was to flash their dicks at the enemy as a means of intimidation. And so these Saxons are going in there with all of these psychedelic drums and psychedelic horns and stuff, and they're taking all kinds of drugs and stuff so that they can achieve these levels of berserkerdom. And, they're using their ancestral symbols. And one of the things that they did to Rome is they charged them tribute. And so Rome was complaining, this is too much money. We can't afford this. We're all going to starve. And so what the leader of the Saxons did is he took out his sword, put it on the scales, and said, Ve Victus, which means woe to the conquered. Mm. They were brutal bastards. And, everybody knew it. They were the murder machines of Europe. And it wasn't for another 100 years that Rome... No, it was less than that, maybe about 50 years. But they got together an army and retook that whole peninsula from them. So, there were lots of invasions into the Rome territory, but all of those invasions and stuff, that really helped shape Rome entirely. Like if you look at Etruscan artwork, it's so much different than Roman artwork. And it's just weird, dude. The Etruscans were some of the biggest sick bastards on the planet. Like in terms of like ancient sickness, these people were into some freaky shit. Mm-hmm. But they also had these huge pieces of like agricultural work. They still have watered fields that run naturally from springs in Tuscany that have been running on those fields since the Etruscan times. The same artwork and stuff. So it's crazy how much of a continuity there is. And they were also language isolates. So there's no precedent for their language, kind of like the Sumerians or the other people that are in your area. What are they called?
The Basques.
The Basques. There we go. Yeah. Language isolate groups are crazy to study. Once you get into that, it's like, wow, these were people on a whole different level of seeing the world.
And that's an interesting point, because I see a post recently saying that they were putting the most ancient language. I misread the post, and that's why I made a mistake. But I read it as the longest language still, the oldest language still in use is from the Euphrates and the Tigris area. The oldest language still in use. Okay, but it wasn't the post. The post was the written language, but I misread it, and it led me to dig a hole. What is the oldest language still in use, right? And so to me, the oldest language still in use must be the Basque, because they're there 7,000 years. Is there any language in the known world? Probably some Aboriginal tribes or whatever, but I mean in the normal world that we have knowledge of, is there any language that precedes 7,000 years from now? Still the same.
Right.
But there is no one, inclusively, I found out through AI, and I test the 3 that I can access to, and they all refuse to admit it, with all kinds of excuses, saying, yeah, no, yeah, but it is from the Crescent Fertile, or no, there is no evidence to support that. Although they exist.
Where do we get our alphabet from?
Arabs?
Phoenician script.
Yeah, Phoenician, yeah.
Phoenicians wrote our alphabet. Those are the Carthaginians.
You're right.
Huge contribution. I wouldn't be surprised if those are magic spells. You know what I mean? Because all the alphabets are in the same order. It's the same quality. There's some kind of encoding magical spell that goes along with the alphabet.
Oh, absolutely. I think that I don't have it here. I think that every single divine alphabet, except, and I'm sorry for those listening, except the new Wicca, although through self-activation you can get the same results, but talking about real, invented with that purpose, imbued with that kind of power, line by line, this language, these ancient traditions of languages, of written codes, written systems that are divine or magical, I think that all of them are truly divine and magical, and they are dangerous to work with, even hieroglyphs. So if someone is playing with that and accidentally is intentionally trying to create something, it will get some result, and it might not be the result it is expecting. That's all I'm saying. So be very careful when using magical or divine alphabets, because you might just only expressing poetry, and in the poetry you say that something happens. For instance, you actually create the event, for instance. So it's very, very dangerous. I hope I'm not sounding cuckoo, but
if you think about it, there's a type of geometry that goes alongside of every language, right? There's a type of shape and feel and quality to it that has a geometric sort of nature. So you're getting certain mathematical quantities that now have relationships to one another that produce ratios that you'll find in lots of different poetry and lots of different artwork and all the rest of this stuff that then creates a timing to those societies and a living metronome about how things work based off of how they say things. Right?
Exactly. Sound is frequency.
Right. And so I think what happens with language is that if you make up a language all of your own, you are now in a private conversation with the universe. Nobody else can understand it. It doesn't go anywhere but to the ears of the only other source of that knowledge. So I think there really is a lot of power in these alternative languages, and it's one that people aren't really looking at. Like, there are qualities to these things that are very definite and very well defined. But again, who are we? Aspiring scientists, I guess.
Look, I think that if you are learning the language and you're just writing words, and your intent is not spiritual, you're not seeing any true power on that language, but the curiosity of history, I see no harm. But if you draw every single letter with intent, with a purpose, realizing its power, you are actually creating something that can actually work and is dangerous. That's my point. So people might think, oh, I can write wherever I want and it affects me nothing. Yeah, it's real. But if you do it with intention, then that's a completely different thing. I must be doing terribly because I already lost a partner, and then you get back. I thought I was losing not only the audience but I thought I was not only losing the audience, but my partners, because he
No,
was
no.
gone, you were gone.
I had to get this to sort of emphasize your point.
Enochian magic for beginners, yes.
Think about the impact that John Dee has had on every century since his existence.
Hmm.
And what if he's encoding things into this Enochian language that we think of as normal, like the grid system, the Euclidean geometry, which he perfected to use in the shipping lanes. Also, the idea of the obsidian mirror that he used to scry out things like North America, which he had a lot of thoughts about. And he was later copied about North America in the works of Francis Bacon, who was one of his contemporaries. And he wrote The New Atlantis. And so we're talking about major encoding of this Enochian style language into the history of America and the future destiny of America. And you've got people like Manly Palmer Hall talking in his book, The Future Destiny of America, mentioning things like Francis Bacon. So we could be living in sort of an encoded reality based in this Enochian script that people don't usually know anything about.
Oh, yes. And even if they do, well, I don't know how many people would be interested in actually exploring it. Because if you think about it, that art, Donald Tyson.
There you
Uh,
go.
you have to, when you look at the ancient Chinese tradition of using those large, almost brooms to do those letters, that's almost like an initiatic act. That's a magical act. That's a spiritual practice where they are drawing a cosmos. It's
John Dee's 5 books of mystery. It's got so much about all of the different setup, and you can see so many parallels between what he's doing in these rituals and what we have for government today, as well as groups like the Mormons that are basically a ripoff of John Dee's ideas about these angelic hosts. And maybe Smith was actually doing a lot of John Dee style magic in his creation of Mormonism.
That and copper book or gold book, and I can't remember if it's a copper or a gold book that is supposed to be at the foundation of the religion.
They've got a golden book, the golden tablets, and you're supposed to feel them under a blanket.
No, they don't have it anymore. They still have it.
No, they never did. It was all a fake from Joseph Smith. And the reason he was able to build such fanaticism is that him and his family like to grow these mushrooms. And it's documented that he was growing these mushrooms. And when they would have these services, he would give people wine imbued with the mushrooms, which is called the kaikion.
Psilocybin. Yeah.
Yeah, this is called the kaikion, and it was used in ancient Greece for the same purposes.
Oh, exactly.
Religious ceremonies, right?
And I believe the Etruscans and the Nords and every single one of these people used some kind of ritual, like not a ritual, but a communion type of gathering.
This is why I say that before you can have a state, you have to have a cult. You can't have a state without a cult. These things go hand in hand. That's how you get a state, is you've got to manage the cult in the direction of power so that they can take it over from the inside.
And then they pretend inside the cult to have different visions, and then they originate different parties. But they always know who's going to rule and who wasn't. So, well, I know that Americans do defend the vote, the liberty of vote to their death, but I just don't believe it. I don't believe it here that is done with papers into boxes. I will certainly not believe it when it's digital and inserted in a computer. Absolutely not. So the result is whatever they want.
We're entering the age of skepticism. And I think that's a really good thing. People are stopping the whole reaction, believing what they see. They know it's all AI generated. It's all slop. The only thing you're offered anymore as culture is slop. And you can tell immediately that that slop has no value. So we're entering into a great age of skepticism, I think. I think a lot of people are catching on. This is all fake, everything we're offered.
Everything, yeah. I used to say here to people that let's all agree, the entire population, in secret. Well, of course, this is an utopia, but in secret, let's all agree that we go all and vote, but we are all going to vote in blank. Okay? All of us vote in blank. And I bet that at the end of the day, the results would come up just the same. Because they might just burn the goddamn thing. I don't have the trouble of counting that stuff. Right? So the results would still appear.
Democracy is the closest appropriation that they can come to of offering freedom, which it really doesn't offer that. All they need to do is have a black box, and then you get whatever result that they want to give you. And that's what we have. That's what the voting is. It's a black box where we don't know what's going on the other side. And we really shouldn't care too much about that. The media's got our back. They'll always look out for us when it comes to voting.
Oh, yes, yes. But the thing is, we don't need to vote. We don't need to decide who rules us, because that's pretty obvious. Whoever rules us should be someone expert on the area is going to rule us with shown experience, right? Not a politician that has never done anything in his life and probably bought this course and is sucking something out of little things in rituals for a long time.
Right.
We're getting to that position. So my point is, if we want a society that can evolve, let's put people that actually understand the subjects that they are about to control and place them in those positions. If I want something to rule science, let's see who are the best group of scientists. Let's try to recruit them and say, okay, I want you to rule the complete science department. Now get people behind you that know each one of the departments and control those sections. And let's increase productivity. Let's help to create inventions. Let's see what we finance. Let's do it. In terms of education, the same thing. Let's put people that have experience in education. People who have knowledge, and mainly people who have wisdom, because people tend to confund to mix knowledge with wisdom. You see, knowledge only tells you what to say. It is wisdom that tells you when, how, and where to say it. That's the difference between knowledge and wisdom in a very simple terms. Because having knowledge doesn't make you clever or doesn't make you a good person at all.
So one of the big draws with the ancient stadiums is that you couldn't be prosecuted for the things you would say inside of the stadium. So what they would do is they would get really drunk and yell at the Caesar. And that was considered to be catharsis, because everybody got a shot to yell the most horrible things you could imagine at the guy who claimed to rule them. And so everybody felt better after doing so.
Sure. So what is the gladiator stuff? If it isn't the way that they manage for people to get all of that anger and revolt out of them in a place of pure insanity, where they are deciding to kill. So all of this is a pure community being completely deranged and insane and psychopath or sociopath in the most absolute state. So today we have in there you have NASCAR, and I think it's the biggest thing. Then you have basketball, you have the soccer, you have the baseball. In Europe we have football. We are simple. We don't need all of that diversity. So football is the thing that rules. And it's the same as politics, because if your father was from Benfica, the son is going to be from Benfica too. Not because he studied the club and he's seen the others and decided, no, this is the club with the best organization. It is the one that gives the best condition to the players. It has some good results. No, it's all a matter of what was my ancestor. Let's be like him. And in a political party is exactly the same thing. What is the point of having a political party if inside that political party you don't have an individual mind? Everything that is your choice is what they choose. They choose the rule of the party. You just say yes. That's what means to belong to a party, is you say yes to whatever the guy that is ruling the party or that circle decides the party will go to. So if that happens, why do I have 260 people seated on an assembly to vote on laws and the rule of a country when the vote is partidary, is from the party? If we have 7 parties, let's have 7 people there. It saves us a lot of money because these people are sponges for money. So it doesn't make sense. Again, what you said, this is not a democracy. This is all a big oligarchy, no different from any other old system that gives control to a few while others just obey and happy to obey it.
You might like this. The government of Carthage was a complex system that combines elements of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. Initially, Carthage had a monarchy, but after 480 BC, the monarchy weakened and Carthage transitioned into an oligarchic republic, characterized by a system of checks and balances. At the head of the Carthaginian state were 2 suffets, or judges, who held judicial and executive power. These suffets were elected annually from among the wealthiest and most influential families. The suffets were sometimes referred to as kings by Greek and Roman authors, but their office was not hereditary. Carthage also had a council known as the 104 Mati, which oversaw the actions of generals and other officers to ensure that they served the best interests of the republic. This body could impose fines, even crucifixion as punishment, and formed panels of special commissioners to deal with various political matters. Additionally, Carthage had a popular assembly that could be called upon to vote. So that was like the Senate, the other one. Called upon to vote on important matters to achieve political consensus and popular coherence. Really didn't change much of the system at all. The assembly
highly corrupt.
highly corrupt. And the assembly was democratic element within the Carthaginian government, although it was often seen as a formality compared with the more powerful oligarchic elements. Aristotle praised Carthage's political system, describing it as a mixed constitution that blended the best characteristics of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy, kind of like what we have in America. Despite the complexity of its government, Carthage managed to avoid significant internal conflicts, rebellions, which Aristotle attributed to the effective distribution of wealth among its citizens. You caught that last part there. What does that sound like? Carthage's government was distinct from Rome's in that it did not incorporate its subjects into the state as effectively as Rome did, but it placed the command of the army in the hands of permanent leader rather than rotating civil magistrates, a permanent foreign policy state that you're not allowed to question.
And they have to maintain a good level of balance, because that leader of the army at any point might decide, nah, I want it all. I just don't want just this Texan. I want it all.
Look at the unipolar party system when it comes to foreign policy in this country. You only do what Israel tells you. You bomb this country. Everybody agrees. You bomb that country. And it's like, how is it being led around by people with no thoughts or opinions of their own? But that's the way they want it. They want a single body that never changes, that commands the foreign policy of this country.
Oh, yeah.
The
Look,
neocons.
The first question is, why on earth were Israel created? How many people have suffered from war and from genocide? How many? How many nations? I don't see a country being created to the American indigenous peoples. Did they create a country for them? I don't think, and gave them nuclear weapons from the start. I didn't see that happen.
They gave them 513 countries, actually. We have 513 countries within the United States, technically, but, the treaties that they have, it makes them, very, very unwieldy to actually make any real changes. But there are 513 autonomous independent nations within the United States. We don't go around murdering them. That's why you don't hear about them, is because we don't go around bombing them to hell. That's why we're not at war. It's because we don't bomb them. Isn't that strange? It's so easy.
Yeah. And let's not forget that the tactics that are being used by America to reach the same objective, there is the eradication. Because in terms of the indigenous peoples, I think in terms comparing to Gaza, the Gaza is much more ahead than there is in America. Because what they are creating now is they are making the public, well, we have this 200 years trying to reestablish the peace, and that the indigenous peoples and the invaders, Americans, lived side by side in saying, well, we recognize what we did to you guys, but now we all have to live together. This was done back in the past, so let's put it behind, and you have this and this and this. Let's try and live together, right? Let's put you in our museums. Let's show the people your culture. Let's do all that. Let's include them in your lives, in their lives. What they're doing now is opening the rift, because with NAPRA, how many generations will it take so that the normal American would have no idea what an indigenous guy is? No idea at all, because the images are being taken from the books are being taken from the libraries, the expositions are being covered or removed, right? So they are completely eradicating the image of the indigenous populations from the normal American. They are creating this rift. How long it would take after the rift is created to start saying that they are bad people? And then doing the same that the Israelis are doing to the people of Gaza. How long does it take? 50 years? 100 years?
There's an interesting situation with America and the Native Americans in that there was 200 years of history before the American Revolution. So in those 200 years of history, you see a very, very different response to the Native American tribes that you do after the Revolution. Before the Revolution, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between these two groups. They would move in next to each other and they wouldn't really have a problem until one or another would be funded by the government to go after each other. This is where you get the French and Indian War. And this is also where you get lots of other skirmishes happening, is the British would be paying these Indians to attack the French or attack the Spanish, and then you would get reprisals back and forth. Everybody was trying to sort of colonize via proxy war using these
terrible
these
but
native
great.
peoples.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. These schemes are fascinating.
Well, what ended up happening was the entire East Coast had this idea of what the Native Americans look like past the Appalachian Mountains. So the Appalachian Mountain Range was the dividing line where European settlement didn't pass for 200 years. So they had this concept in their mind and what they were expecting to see when they went out past that point. But that wasn't necessarily the case. They ran into a lot of different groups, and you can see it in Lewis and Clark that these were completely different societies, like the Mississippian Society, who had these giant pyramids out there. And who knows what else they had built, right? We don't get a full accounting from Lewis and Clark. There were a lot of things happening that weren't completely documented, obviously, until after, this great push to the West. So I think what we see today as our conception of Native Americans comes from that period where there was a lot of warfare going on the East Coast, and not necessarily a decent picture of everything to the West, because all that stuff just got swept under that same image rug that they had before they did the westward expansion. So there could be a lot more to this Tartarian thing. We're only given a certain image.
Well, I think I tend to see. I think it's impossible to deny that what they call Tartaria. I'm not sure if that's the correct name, but I think that presence is undeniable. Although while they say that it is actual from the presence of the Tartarian peoples on those places, I disagree. I think the Tartarians have been used since time immemorial as the holders of this knowledge, and they are called to build these structures to have these different functionalities or powers or mystiques. They are the holders of this knowledge, and so they appear all over the world with these groups of architects, some following Fulcanelli, others follow others, but they are the builders. They are not a civilization from my point of view. They are the builders of this majestic structures that clearly have more functionalities within the metaphysical than they have in the physical. And
We
that's
have
why they appear
reports.
in the America, Europe, everywhere, and so on.
We have reports from the, I believe it was the late 1800s, where this guy shows up out of nowhere at a church that just had their balcony collapse or something. No, I think it was their stairwell collapse. And so he gets there and decides he's going to build the stairwell. And it looks like it's chopped out of a single piece of wood. It's a spiral staircase that looks completely out of this world. Well, the guy leaves. They never hear from him again. But somehow this thing is built in ways that they've never even thought possible. And how is this happening? And nobody's really, cared too much. It's still standing to this day. People can go see this architectural marvel for themselves. But like that, it's not alone. Like we see other cases, like the case of Edleed Scaldin in Coral Castle. Like it seems like this builder person just comes out of nowhere and does this amazing thing, and then we're left with nothing but questions.
Exactly. I think that's exactly my point. Is that while we're trying to look for a civilization, it will be very hard because all we have is a map saying Tartaria, where now is Mongolia. Right? When I see no connection, but I see a connection when you see in legends, like the legend of Preston John and Alexander the Great, when you see that Alexander the Great commissioned Preston John, whose working force and builders were the Tartarians, to build him towers to keep the creatures, the cryptids, and the giants from the land of Gog and Magog by the construction of sonic towers that will keep them at bay. On the place where these sonic towers used to be, now we find a piece of the Great Wall of China. It's not all of it, but they used to be the places where the Great Wall of China was built had some of these ruinous, not working anymore towers that were commissioned by Alexander the Great, supposedly by Alexander the Great to Preston John, that was the commander of this working force. Funny enough, it was Genghis Khan, father, that wanted to marry his daughter to Preston John. Preston John realized you want is to reign your elder to the power. But since I'm a non-mortal, that doesn't make any sense. So it will end badly. So he refused the marriage with her daughter. And it was his son, the one that we know as a conqueror, that came after, that the Genghis Khan, his father killed Preston John in an ambush by treason, killed him, and took over the control that Preston John had. That's why Preston John suddenly disappears from scene, and all we see is this massive preparation for a Mongol invasion that was performed by the son, his son, the Genghis Khan, that is the one that we know. So all of this is somehow connected. And so Tartaria could be from the Mongols, but they were the ones that knew how to construct this type of structures that had functionalities connected to these energies. I probably was very confusing in all I said, but I did try to make it simple.
Well, there is an apocryphal book of the Bible that references Genghis Khan. And
Awesome.
so, yeah, I'm trying to look it up right now. But
no, I mean awesome, because I have them all. So you just have to tell me what is the title of the book.
I'm looking it up right now. It's one of the rare like Jewish apocrypha. Genghis, Khan. All right, let me see.
Oh, by the way, Ethan apologized, but he had
had to go.
Yeah, something scheduled. So we are also doing it for 3 hours and 13 minutes. So,
okay, it's called the Yi Jing Apocrypha of Genghis Khan, the Black Dragon Society's treatise on the art of Ninzuo by Warlock Asylum, published on October 12th, 2013. This book is not a historical document, but rather a modern work that explores the esoteric and spiritual themes associated with Genghis Khan as part of the Ninzuo tradition. I don't think that's it. But there was a book of the Bible that said the 1,000 years of Alexander the Great having this wall to keep these Mongols back in represents the 1,000 years between Christ leaving the earth and Christ returning to the earth. And so
Hmm.
the Mongols moving back into the steppe was that idea of Jesus returning to reign on earth. And it's funny because they have an entirely sky-based religion that is very similar in quality to the most earliest Proto-Indo-European forms of religion, having
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
with Deus Pater. And so those symbols just don't go away when you understand that that was the basis for a lot of why the Bible was written the way it was, because Israel retained all of this genetic memory material for all the rest of these different societies that marched through there. So Israel being the place where it is, all of these different armies had to go, if they were going into Africa to go fight Egypt, they had to come through Israel. If they wanted to go into Asia, they had to come through Israel. So as these different armies were traveling through, they collected a lot of those mythologies, and you see that reflected in the Bible. So it's like all of the different collective ancestral memories in one place. It's, obviously not the full picture, but that's why it had so much power. Those were the symbols of these different societies.
That's very interesting. I have to go and look for that mention, because if I don't have them all, then I'm missing that one. I have to find it. But I, I
We
think
should get going. We're
yeah,
like
yeah.
3 minutes, 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah. So we'll continue
You
next
got it.
time.
We'll have another trialogue next week. So anybody left in the
Sure.
audience, you come join us again. All right. Bye.